Test, test, test. Checking the audio real quick. Should be ready to go in a second here. Stream looks good. Connection looks good. Waiting for the test, test. Checking the audio real quick. Okay, that looks good. Can mute that. Okay, I think we should be good. Switch the scene over. Okay, here we go. All right. Hello. Hope everybody's doing well. I want to take a moment and thank anybody who stopped by and checked out the previous video. I really appreciate the support, and I'm glad that, well, hopefully it was interesting and informative. If you have any feedback, anything you'd like me to cover in the future, anything you'd like clarification on, anything you want to challenge me on, I'm more than happy to hear any feedback or thoughts that you might have. Part of why I am electing to do streams as opposed to diving back into another massive, like, pre-edited, pre-scripted video project is because, well, in addition to the fact that I can get these out more quickly, I like the idea of potentially being able to have a more dynamic conversation with people, which is obviously a bit harder to do when you spend like 4 months making a 3.5 hour long thing and then 7 months not making anything. So anyway, I'm really appreciative. So I just wanted to say that for the record. And moving on to tonight's stream and the topic at hand. Last time we talked about the Chameleon Summon in particular, and how it goes up against, sorry, so let me recap actually. For those who might just be tuning into this video and who haven't seen the previous ones in the series, we're discussing the matchup between Kakuzu versus Pain in a hypothetical battle. And we're going through and listening to this debate that was done a couple of years ago by Noodles and WeaabooWarrior. I should post the link to this in the description, but this is the title of the video. Here's Noodles' channel. Go check him out. Go watch the video. If you're interested in debates in general, in Naruto in general, or Naruto debates in specific, you'll get a lot out of watching this video, I think. That being said, we were talking a bit about how Kakuzu would do when faced up against oh hey, how's it going? Happy holidays to you too. Am I pronouncing your name right? Let me see. Is it Auhert or Auhert Brahma? That's a cool username, man. What's your profile icon there? It's a little small on my end. I can't quite see it, but that looks cool. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for saying hi, and happy holidays to you too. I was just saying that, like, in the first stream, I think I spent a bit more time, or like I dedicated a certain amount of time to talking about the debate first and foremost, and let me see. I was kind of focused on like playing the debate first and then responding as I was going. Whereas tonight, I'd like to kind of do what I tried to do in the second stream and first take a moment to just look at the characters themselves and the feats and the fights and all that. And then once I feel like I've gone over that and I have a decent understanding of them in and of themselves, then I can move on to going back to the debate and seeing what they had to say. So that we have everything in context. Waiting for the discussion on swag versus ramen pack. Oh yeah, okay. Is there anything in particular that you were hoping to hear or to talk about? If there's something you'd like to talk about, I'd be happy to kind of divert to that for a little bit. Are you talking about the Noodles versus swag debate on Itachi versus Pain, or the one on Kakuzu versus Pain? Okay, cool. Good to know that I got it right. If I happen to mispronounce something, feel free to correct me. I know how annoying it can be when people get your name wrong. Let me take a drink of water real quick. So yeah, let me know what you think. I'm happy to. I spent way too much time listening to those debates, and I really do enjoy them. I really did get a lot out of listening to them, both in terms of just the entertainment value of consuming them, and then also just like, I'll be honest, the first couple of times that I listened through the debates, I kind of just accepted everything at face value because I didn't really know. Like, I'd read a lot of Naruto in the past, and I loved the series, but I hadn't really thought about like hypothetical matchups or power scaling or anything. So I was like, oh, these people clearly are passionate. They clearly know what they're talking about. And I just kind of like absorbed everything and kind of accepted most of it at face value. And then I went back and reread the series and I started to notice, wait, I don't know if I agree with that, or maybe that doesn't quite line up. And so that's what kind of motivated me to get into doing the videos in the first place, more as an exploration for myself of just figuring out like, well, what did I take for granted? What do I actually not understand? And like, what can I learn from this? So I think they're great resources for that. Okay, let's see. Kakuzu versus Pain. Oh yeah. That was actually I think the first one that I ever heard, and I've listened to that a bunch of times. The discussion on shadow possession actually amping those under its control that Ramen Pack brought up. Okay, yeah, so I'll happily give my 2 cents on that. Um, I think it's open to interpretation, and I think if we look at, just go and look at the chapter real quick because I actually had this section pulled up. My opinion is that if Shikamaru were to amp like Kid Konohamaru, to amp somebody who was under his power, I do think that his like the movement of his arms would be copied directly onto Kid Konohamaru. Did I say Shikamaru? I meant to say Konohamaru. Um, and so Kid Konohamaru's arms would be moving as fast as Shikamaru's, and that would probably be an amp for the little kid, right? Because he's just a little kid. He doesn't have any feats at that point. He's not very strong. Um, but conversely, if I don't know, Choji in his giant butterfly state during the war, if Shikamaru was trying to move him around, would he be able to move him at the same speed? We know he can use the yo-yo technique later in the war to kind of like fling him around, but would he be able to just mimic his movements? I don't think so. Unless, well, I think he could do it, but it would require a lot of strain because at the end of the day, this still is a physical jutsu. He's exerting like his physical strength through chakra as a medium in order to be able to pull this off. So the extent to which he can move other characters is going to be determined by that physical strength. So I don't think it's like a magic hack, like where he's, you know how like Ino can transfer her mind into another character and she basically controls their whole body. It seems to me like the shadow possession is much more of a, I think I scrolled past that actually. Yeah, here we go. Is much more of a physical connection, almost like I think Swag was saying that it was like a wire, like a puppet jutsu. So my personal opinion is that given the physical nature of the jutsu, given that it is a, I think it's a yang release technique, and it is something that Shikamaru himself has to like physically strain to hold on to. I think anybody lower than him would be amped to match his speed. Anybody higher than him, in terms of like strength or mass or whatever, he would probably have to expend more effort to get that thing moving along the same way. But since Hidan is approximately his same size, I think they would probably be roughly comparable. Did that answer your question at all? I kind of went off on a tangent there. Let me know what you think. I don't. Oh, I see you say. I don't agree with it, and Ramen later on debunk that by stating it's an ineffective method. Yeah. I think. I don't think it's safe to just assume out of the gate, right, that if somebody gets possessed by shadow possession, they're gonna automatically get amped. Something else that Swag talked about later is his belief that the what the hell is it called? The Edo Jinchuriki that were controlled by Obito during the war. They, according to him, were getting amped because Obito had chakra rods inserted into them. Let me see if I can find that. And I disagree with that, because just because they happen to have a chakra rod in them and that chakra rod is making a connection between them and somebody else doesn't inherently mean that chakra is flowing into them to provide them with an amp. So similarly, yeah, let's see if we can find an example of this. Similarly with the shadow possession tendrils, I think that's a physical connection between the user and the target, and it's only going to be an amp if the user is demonstrably stronger. So if Shikamaru is demonstrably stronger than Hidan, then yes, it would be an amp, but if not, then it won't be. yeah, is this where B notices it, where he's being a little sus somewhere in there? Anyway, hopefully you know what I'm referring to with the chakra rods and all that. I see your message. Let's see. We can both agree that Hidan is stronger than Shikamaru. Well, I'd love to hear you talk more about that. I think it's honestly potentially debatable because here we see that okay, granted, some of this is like a slight, what do you call it? We have to be careful about making too many assumptions here, right? But I don't see that Shikamaru is like unduly straining to be able to move Hidan around. I don't see that that he makes us any statements to the effect that it's particularly difficult to control or restrain Hidan. And when we actually get to, let's see, when he brings him away off into the side of the forest, he is able to successfully hold him down. In this exchange over here, like, let's just look at what happens over here, right? So his shadow possession is able to kind of, it isn't able to reach him immediately when he's up on the tree, but he's able to flank him and use this maneuver with the kunai coming in from the other side, which I think he expects will hit, and it nearly does. It's so close. It's like a few hairs breadths away. And that misses him. Hidan is able to get away, so he's fast enough to react to it. But then Shikamaru does this, so he has a contingency, a backup plan, in flinging the kunai up and extending his shadow. Hidan is able to outmaneuver that, but Shikamaru has a contingency there as well, so he's got plans within plans on layers, and he's able to flank him and close the distance and trap him with their shadows here in the tree. So on the one hand, Shikamaru has a high degree of tactical reasoning and positioning and all that. And on that note, I don't think it should be controversial for us to suggest that Hidan is maybe not as smart as Genius IQ Shikamaru over here. So once he gets him in shadow possession, he is then able to successfully hold him down and take him away from the battlefield. It doesn't seem to be overly straining. I mean, he's just having a casual conversation with him, right? Let's just go for a pleasant stroll, shall we? So he's taking him away and leading him into this trap. And here's where things get a little bit more complicated. So if you were to ask me, Shikamaru, no shadow possession, just a straight up fight, taijutsu and all that, and Hidan gets to use his curse ritual jutsu, do I think Shikamaru would win that? Probably not. I think that they're relatively evenly matched in terms of their overall combat feats and abilities and speed. Shikamaru does get the advantage over Hidan, but it's through that clever tactics and manipulation and all that stuff, and through planning and through having those shuriken with the chakra infused into them that's already prepared. So it's a lot of prep, a lot of tactics and all that. If they were to just go at each other in an all-out brawl, no, I don't think he would necessarily win. I think it would be difficult for him to win because Hidan is, as you know, he's immortal. I don't know that there's a whole lot that Shikamaru could do with his base taijutsu. I don't know if he's like, okay, so he cuts off his head. If he manages to pull that off, then okay, maybe, but you know, that in and of itself will be difficult. And as I'm sure you know, Hidan gets one drop of blood and that's, you know, he's done. So he's screwed. So he has to do all this prep just to get him into an advantageous position. Now that he's in the trap, notice that he seems tired. He's like exhausted. And just as he starts to show that exhaustion for the first time, that's when the shadow possession snaps apart. Now, that being said, he is still able to see Hidan's attack coming in. And not only does he manage to dodge it, but he dodges it and so quickly takes out the vial of blood from Kakashi with Kakuzu's blood and like expertly puts it on the blade while faking this wound for himself. So that is a pretty insane thing to be able to do that quickly with that level of dexterity. That being said, I think with Shikamaru on the ground like this now, if Hidan hadn't done this sort of arrogant thing of like taking his time to set up the ritual, hadn't been a doofus and had just like slashed forward and stabbed Shikamaru in the head here or something, I think he could have easily taken him out, because at this point, what is he going to do? He's exhausted, he's on the ground, he's prone, but this is, again, all part of his tactics. This is all part of his like his way of like mind gaming Hidan. That being said, he has one more thing which I know has come up in a debate before. I think Swag talked about it with Noodles, which is or maybe WeaabooWarrior talked about it with Noodles. I forget. But when he tries to cut off Hidan's neck over here, so notice that Hidan is looking away. He thinks that Shikamaru is dead, and is he able to perceive him? All right, so he's turning off his ritual. He does actually perceive. You see this whoosh sound over here? That sound effect indicates that Shikamaru wasn't like totally stealthy when he got up. Hidan hears it, and even though he is convinced that Shikamaru is dead, he still is able to perceive this happening and kind of react to it. So you could look at this and say, okay, in this situation, Shikamaru actually has a strong advantage, doesn't he? Because Hidan's turned off his ritual. He's totally disengaged from the combat. He's like not paying attention really, and yet he is still able to avoid a lethal blow from Shikamaru. On the other hand, you can say Shikamaru has the ability, if he lands a hit with a bladed weapon, he does have the ability to wound, potentially even like destroy parts of Hidan's body on his own. So Shikamaru has the AP to damage Hidan, but Hidan, even when at a massive disadvantage in terms of like perception or whatever, is still able to react to and avoid a lethal attack from Shikamaru. You could counter that by saying that Shikamaru is exhausted, but you know, over the course of a fight, there's going to be an exchange of blows. You're going to get tired pretty quickly. These things tend to escalate pretty quickly as well. They're not marathons, they're more sprints in a lot of cases in Naruto fights. And now he's exhausted and he is able to hold him in shadow possession one more time. A final note about this is you could say that since it requires all of those paper bombs to successfully blow him up, that indicates that he doesn't feel like he has the AP to do it without that level of assistance. I think that might be a valid take. Let's see what Hidan says. Putting an opponent under the same jutsu so many times, even an idiot would start picking up on his details. I think that's a little bit of a self-report there from Hidan, calling himself an idiot. Your jutsu isn't as powerful as it was earlier. Okay, so yeah, each time you bind me, its strength and duration diminishes. So he does have a limit, and this is something that Swag and I'm pretty sure Swag and Noodles argued about. With a certain amount of spiciness about whether or not Shikamaru like runs out of chakra. If you want me to talk about that, I can, but basically I do think the less chakra he has, the less powerful each subsequent version of the shadow possession is, and the less long he can hold it for. So now he's like exhausted, and I think that basically covers it. Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate the discussion prompt. It's always fun to kind of dive into this, and it's cool to connect with somebody that has also experienced those debates. I'd be curious what you thought of the debate overall, if you thought there was a clear winner, or if there's anything else that you wished that they had kind of taken more time to dive into. One sec. Oh yeah. I don't know how he calculated that. I'm willing to just accept that at face value. I will say that sometimes it's very difficult to get a sense of timing with series like this, or with any manga really, because, you know, we're obviously very seldom given precise time between panels. I would like to just be able to say that it's essentially instantaneous, right? Like, okay, so as soon as he finishes talking, then she starts talking, then he starts talking, and it's like a natural, like we can time these panels by assuming like a natural flow of the conversation or something like that. But that, I mean, it's a lot of guesswork after a certain point. Let's see. I think Swag won, but the immortality is another topic. Yeah, I think obviously you can win the debate overall, but still have points where you fail to kind of articulate your position, or you just like happen to get something wrong, right? That's fair. Oh, Hidan mentions it. Okay, I must have missed that, sorry. If that's the case, then yeah, I mean, oh, right, because I did see him say, like, your shadow possession has a limit of 5 minutes or something like that, right? So I must have just missed it. But that's a good point. So if that's the case, then that's a rare instance where the series is actually giving us a time frame, which is pretty rare. Okay, let me see. You said go back to the trap layout before he unstabs himself. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, just the two of us now, and the shadow move, its limit is about 5 minutes. Yep. Good catch. Good catch. I appreciate that. Yep. That's a good point. I wonder if he found this out from talking to him previously, or from their fight previously, or if he just kind of deduced it by feeling that it was weakening or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, but that's definitely good. Thank you for pointing that out. I think there was something else that they kind of got into for a little while that I was a little bit I don't remember what it was. That I felt was a little bit unfortunate that they kind of got stuck on, but I can't recall it off the top of my head. It's fine. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, you helped me remember. Thank you. So something that I pretty strongly disagree with is I think Noodles has made the statement a couple of times that part of the reason why that he perceives Kakuzu to be a genius, and part of the reason why is that Kakuzu picked apart Shikamaru's genius plan in an instant. And my take on that is that, you know, Kakuzu had seen Shikamaru previously. He was already familiar with the shadow possession. So this is not the first time that he's experienced this, right? And he's had, I think it was 6 days since the last time they fought while they were draining the, what do you call it? The chakra and the Biju from the Jinchuriki to basically just sit still. So he's got time to think of a plan. And what he does here is, yes, he does bury his hand under the ground kind of preemptively, but he doesn't whatchamacallit. He breaks out of the shadow possession, but this assertion that he picked apart Shikamaru's entire plan when the plan has really just started, and the plan involves like getting blood from Kakuzu himself and then transferring it over to Hidan and all that. I disagree with that. I think they were way overgassing Kakuzu's intelligence feat. But that's just my take on that. Shikamaru's tactics don't always win, and many people have a counter to it. Yeah, it's true. Well, I'd be curious if you have more thoughts on that. Are you talking about like when he captures all those sound ninja in the shadow possession in order to like and then gets saved by Asuma during the Konoha crush? Because yeah, he is kind of in over his head there. I can try to go back and find that. Oh, you know, that's a good question. I actually don't have a Discord set up yet. I'm just kind of talking into the mic on OBS. But if you think that you would like to like get on a voice call in the future, yeah, I'd totally be down for that. I'll have to set something up, but I'm happy to look into that. Sure. And I'm open to, yeah, I do want to talk about the, whatchamacallit, the dog at some point, and all this, but I'm happy to continue talking about this too. I can be, sorry, I can generally be flexible with the stream topics, sort of a jumping off point, get a discussion going. Yeah, thanks for the tip there. I appreciate that. Or the suggestion for the call. Are you talking about like a Discord call? Because I have a Discord account. I think I just need to get myself set up with it. I honestly don't know off the top of my head where that scene is, but I know what you're talking about, right? He's like, he stays behind and he uses shadow possession on this whole group of ninja, and then he's like running out of time, and then Asuma has to come bail him out, basically. I'm not gonna go fishing for it right now unless you really want me to, because I'm just gonna focus on the like Gamabunta stuff. But yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I think it should be. I'd be happy to. Yeah, and in the meantime, if there's anything else you want to talk about, any other questions, like that's like kind of my goal in the long term, is to just be able to talk to people about stuff. I don't. I won't pretend like I'm like a total expert on everything. I'll be honest and say that like I don't know much about. There's some popular characters that I don't know much about, like Guy and Lee, for example. I don't know much about their feats. I don't have any spicy Sasuke takes. I do, I do have a lot to say about like Itachi and Pain and Kakuzu and all that, mostly just because that my exposure to that has been through constantly digesting those debates over the years. So, but yeah, sorry for the coughing. Getting the holiday cold, I think, unfortunately. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So no, this was great though, because I was gonna talk about Kakuzu and go through like Diamond Morph, Diamond Armor, and this was a good way of kind of segueing into talking about him and Hedon, which is going to be important. And so I think I'll just take it from there, since we talked about Hedon, we talked about Kakuzu a little bit in his feats, and it'll transition nicely into talking about Diamond Morph. So the title the title of the stream was Diamond Dogs, and it was my attempt to kind of foreshadow that I want to talk both about the dog summon, which is, let's see, do I actually have him pulled up here? Yeah. And I also want to talk about Kakuzu's Diamond Morph ability and how the two of those things might interact with one another. In the debate between Noodles and WeaabooWarrior, Noodles basically makes the claim that this dog can't do anything to Kakuzu, can't hurt him, and that includes with Diamond Armor on and also with Diamond Armor off. And Weeaboo, on the other hand, makes the claim that the dog could potentially hurt him. And to me, intuitively, it's a pretty easy resolve on that front. But actually proving that in a like, even if it's intuitive to me reading the comic, and I have an opinion on it that I feel like comfortable with, proving either side in a debate can be kind of tricky, depending on how you tackle like the burden of proof and all that stuff. So before getting into all that, I just want to establish that Kakuzu's Diamond Morph is a jutsu that, for anybody who doesn't know, is an Earth-style jutsu, and it functions by allowing him to harden a part of his body. When that body part is hardened, it takes on a darker appearance, and it massively increases its attack potential. It also becomes highly resistant to physical damage. So let's see what Kakuzu himself says over here. So right before he gets hit by Choji's human juggernaut, this is in chapter 333, right before he gets hit by human juggernaut, he does this, and this is an earth style hand seal. And when he comes out of the attack, which is in a few panels down, Choji gets repelled and pushed backwards, and then we see Kakuzu here with that darkened appearance to his hand and excuse me, and to his face as well. And this is what Shikamaru says. He's got some jutsu that lets him harden his body. That's his ability. Good eye, it's true. Physical attacks are virtually useless against me. And then he gets penetrated by the Raikiri from Kakashi coming up. And Kakashi says that flesh hardening jutsu of yours, from the signs you were weaving, it's an earth style jutsu. Okay? And part of the reason why Kakashi's able to do this and kill him so effectively is because lightning has a type advantage over earth and basically just like tears it apart. In the same way that fire jutsu will also have a negative, like be weak to water, earth is also weak to lightning. Now, this actually sets up an interesting subversion for later in the fight, where Kakuzu is then able to use the combination of his multiple elements in order to kind of press Kakashi in return. So he kind of subverts this temporary advantage that Kakashi has over him. And I don't know, I think that's a pretty cool way of exploring the theme of, yeah, here we go. So in this situation, Kakashi is pushing with his water wall jutsu up against the wind enhanced fire. And Kakuzu's using fire and wind simultaneously because, you know, wind supplements and enhances fire. And Kakashi is able to stalemate it. He's able to protect himself against it. And I would argue that maybe he's pushing it back a little bit. If you look at the sort of angles here, I guess it kind of implies that the water is clashing with the fire and maybe pushing it back a little bit. But also, you know, you can kind of see that it's becoming steam immediately. I think in my previous stream I mentioned that, like, if you have a house that's on fire and it's burning extremely hot, and you try to pour water on it, or like you have a fireman who's shooting like water out of a hose at it, it'll just immediately turn to steam in some cases, because the moment the water makes contact with the fire, it's just so hot that it essentially vaporizes it immediately. So I think that might be what's happening here. Kakashi is like just kind of keeping it at bay, but he's not able to defeat it. So that's, I really like the way that Kishimoto sometimes will set up those like parallels, or those yeah, I think parallels is probably the best way to put it, and then invert them or subvert them later on. But going back to Diamond Morph, the thing I want to establish and make very clear about Diamond Morph is that it is a morph. The name of the jutsu means something. It is, you know, a deliberate choice to call it Diamond Morph. And the reason why it's called that, to my interpretation anyway, actually I don't really think it's up for much interpretation, I think it's pretty clear, is that it is a transformation of his skin, right? Like Shikamaru himself says that he has some jutsu that lets him harden his skin. Let me see his exact quote. Sorry, I'm jumping around between the panels a lot here. Here we go. He's got some jutsu that lets him harden his body. And I want to point that out because at one point in the debate, it was mentioned that, I think Noodles said that he thinks it's like an additional layer of armor that Kakuzu is summoning that gets put on top of his body. So in order to, in the same way that like Gaara has his sand armor, he interpreted it as being something like that, where in order to get to Kakuzu, you have to go through his armor and then reach him. But that's not really the case. It's his anatomy that's actually getting stronger and getting harder through the use of this jutsu. Now, as for how strong that actually makes him, this is one of the first times we actually see him. I think it is the first time we actually see him use this jutsu. He hardens his hand and he punches through this door and just like shreds it apart, right? Blasts it apart. You can see it's just like, okay, it didn't vaporize it, it didn't liquefy it or anything like that, but he does actually break through it. And I want to see if I can find this. In the third data book, which I apologize, I don't have the scan. My scanner is broken at the moment. I had all of these scans previously on my computer, and I lost them through an unfortunate series of events. But at any rate, I have these scans are going to be in the Naruto official character data book. It's published by Viz. You can get it on Crunchyroll, and as soon as I have an opportunity to, I will rescan and re-upload them. And what I'm looking for here in the background is this specific scan of the Fire Temple door. Yeah. So I'm gonna read this off of the data book. The entry is called Iron Wall Seal, and it's basically in the data book. If you find it, it's just this. It's a picture of this with the text underneath. It says, "A strong and robust jutsu to ensure the gates do not open for the unholy. The seal invoked on the gateway to the Fire Temple in order to keep out intruders from the outside world. 2 stone statues on each side of the gate form a barrier. The seal can be undone by channeling the unique chakra of the sages, known as the Gift of the Sages. Ordinarily, only ninja monks can enter and exit the gate. The Akatsuki, however, destroyed the stone statues and entered the temple by destroying the seal itself." Okay, so not only is this an extremely strong reinforced metal door, it is also fortified further by a sealing jutsu. And Kakuzu casually hardens his hand and just blasts it apart. So that is why you'll also find this jutsu has a second name, which is Earth Spear, or Domu. This is from the Naruto wiki. You can see here. Sorry, one sec. Okay. Kakuzu's Earth Spear is an Earth style attack, and it also gets referred to as Earth Spear because, in addition to its like high degree of defense, it does essentially turn his head into like an explosive spear, like a pile bunker or something like that. And if you read about where is he? Yeah, I'm going to read this part here. Like the rest of Kakuzu's techniques, the name of this technique comes from the legendary mecha anime Mobile Suit Gundam. The name Domu was taken from the Gundam MS-09B. Dom, the name was given kanji to create the name of this technique, right? So I think all of Kakuzu's like techniques and his hearts and all that is meant to be like is inspired by Gundam, which is pretty cool. So it kind of makes sense, right? That he would have this ability that not only hardens his skin, but allows him to do a massive amount of damage and like enhances his attack power at the same time. It's a very effective weapon. Okay, so with that being said, I want to point out that Shikamaru also mentioned these two things here, right? These are the other two examples that we get of Kakuzu explicitly using Diamond Morph. One of them is when Raido, back in the Asuma fight, I think it's a few chapters after this. Might as well just pull it up. It's when he, this character called Raido, shows up to reinforce and tries to stab him with what is referred to as an ebony blade. It's not specified what that means here in the series. Here in the manga itself, but in the third data book as well, there is an entry. Sorry for that flicker there. It was. Let me find the actual sheet because his kind of entrance is pretty cool as well. It's gonna be a little further along, isn't it? It's after Asuma dies. Right, should be right around here. Not to waste time or anything, but I like to be able to see things in context. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here's Aoba, who does the crow jutsu, I believe. A pitiful attempt at obfuscation, and then here Raido shows up. He shows up with this black blade, and Kakuzu immediately recognizes it as something he calls Ebony Blade, and this happens. And we're not given an explanation as to what's going on right here exactly, or what Ebony Blade even means. As far as we know, it's only called that because it's dark. But the third data book actually does specify that it's called an Ebony Blade because it's coated, or it's called Ebony Blade because it's black, but it is also coated in an extremely deadly poison. So, Kakuzu sees this, recognizes what it is, and chooses to use Diamond Morph here. We don't know it at the time, but it's specified here, made very explicit, that he's using Diamond Morph in order to deflect it, which to me tells me something about Kakuzu's baseline durability. He believes that he can get cut by this sword, by this, if you want to, I don't think it's specified that it's made out of like ebony, the material, right? It's just ebony in color. So this is a metal sword, and Kakuzu does not want to risk getting cut by it because he knows it's poisoned and he thinks the poison can damage him. So diegetically, meaning on panel, like in the universe, Kakuzu himself has just revealed something about the limitations of his own baseline durability, that he believes he can get cut by sharp metal. So that, and that in order to like safeguard himself and try to avoid getting poisoned, he thinks it's worth using Diamond Morph. This other example is from earlier in this fight. We can go back a couple of chapters and see this. It won't take very long. And this one is also very clear. Let's see, it's actually one chapter, right? So let's see what's happening here. Kamaru tries to use Shadow Possession on them. They jump out of the way. We have the kunai with the paper bombs showing up, and Kakuzu immediately starts hardening his hand again. Now, Hidan, despite the fact that Hidan can probably tank this, like he's not going to get totally deleted by it, obviously, he still decides that it's worth risking, like, or like using his scythe in order to protect himself. And we see that the paper bomb doesn't blow his head off. It doesn't like rip a hole in his chest or whatever. but it does impact the scythe and it does blow apart the cable. So these paper bomb explosions are, you know, obviously not vaporizing forests or whatever, but they are, I would liken them to, let's see, like hand grenades or shape charges or something like that. And I would say that they, you know, they can clearly blow through metal just fine. 1 second. Sorry, I didn't see your message before. You think Sasori above Kakuzu? I think so, yeah. It's going to depend on whether or not Sasori can get his poison to Kakuzu, though, because as we've just demonstrated, right, like Kakuzu can harden his hand in order to negate the damage both of explosives and of piercing things. So he could potentially use that to safeguard against anything that Sasori throws at him, so even like poison blades or knives or anything like that, and just have them like break against his skin or like glance off of his skin with that quote-unquote armor that he has. On the other hand, as long as we think he can breathe, then Sasori has plenty of opportunities to like coat him in like coat the area that they're fighting in poison gases, which would be a problem. However, yeah, poison gas, exactly. What you could argue in response to that, though, is that Kakuzu does have wind style, and he's able to use it with his hearts, with like either with his heart like in his body, kind of like firing off his shoulder, or he can let the heart go out of his body and then shoot it like at a distance, like we see him do later in the fight. So if that's the case, could he just like put his hearts at various places around the battlefield and then use them to blow away the poison gas? Like, could the wind blow away the poison gas? What I think he's going to struggle with is two things. The third Raikage's Iron Sand is, I really wish I had the skin. Maybe I can just look here. It's stated in the third data book. The thing with the third data book is that, like, because it's an official publication, the scans are harder to find, I guess, because of copyright or whatnot. Whereas like 1, 2, and 4 are all available on Naruto Versity. But I don't think the Iron Sand is. Let me just see, because it's in the third. These aren't the actual. Looking for the actual jutsu files. Maybe that one. But yeah, like there's some. So this is interesting, right? There's something in the third data book that says Iron Sand is invincible, or like cannot be blocked because it's poisonous and magnetic or something like that. So if we take that at face value, then maybe that can get through Diamond Morph, but it's an if, I think. And then the other thing is just like Sasori has so many goddamn puppets. He has like so many things in his arsenal. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? No, thank you. He has so many things in his arsenal, like so many different opportunities to flank Kakuzu, to attack him from different directions. And Kakuzu can use Diamond Morph, sure, to harden his skin, but while he's using it, he can't move. So what does he, like, any part of his body that he hardens cannot be moved while it's hardened. So what does he do when he's being surrounded by 100 puppets, all slashing at him, all, like, using poisoned attacks? Sooner or later, he has to drop his Diamond Morph, and he has to start engaging with them, and also he has to fucking breathe. So it's really going to be a question of whether or not his 4 hearts outside of his body can like run interference enough for him and like create enough openings the way that Chio did with like her 10 puppets in order to like let him start shredding through some of the other puppets. I think he would be fine in terms of like using Diamond Morph punches to get through some of them. I mean, if Sakura can do it, I think he can do it. But just the level of overwhelm and that Sasori has, I think it's gonna be a high diff win, if anything. Oh yeah, if you have that would be amazing. I have not been able to find scans on hand for that, so if you can share those, that'd be great. But also I can just actually get my damn scanner out of storage and do that at some point. Um, yeah, I scanned a bunch of them for my for the video I did on the Swag versus Noodles debate on Itachi versus Pain, and then I moved and had to get a new computer, and just all this shit happened all at once, and so unfortunately I don't have them available, and should just take the time over the holidays to go through and rescan the whole thing. But if you already have it, that's great. Oh yeah, in English, that'd be amazing. I don't know. So yeah, I just kind of babbled a bit about Saucery there. Do you agree with that take? Do you think that that Saucery just like no diffs him? Is there anything I missed? Because the other thing I forgot to mention though is Saucery can move his heart around between the puppets, right? Like he can just kind of relocate it wherever he wants. So yeah, I don't. I could see arguments being made for either character. I think Kakuzu is probably going to lose through attrition over time. I don't think Saucery is going to speed blitz him. I think he's going to have to kind of be patient and whittle away at him and like look for opportunities like chinks in the armor and stuff like that, and then use his poison to sort of gradually erode away at his defenses. But it'll take him time and effort, and meanwhile Kakuzu as well is going to have to play very carefully. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, I know the Hiruko puppet as well supposedly has like extremely high durability. I have to go back and look at those feats, but then again, right? Like Sakura, if I remember correctly, like Sakura punched through it, right? So I this is something that in a debate somebody would be like, yeah, prove it, like do a calc or something, right? But intuitively, I think that if Sakura can punch through it, we just saw what fucking Kakuzu did to that fire temple door. I would not be offended if somebody told me that he could like diamond morph punch through Hiruko or something like that. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna check on the stream health over here. Everything looks good. Cool. Okay. So I'm gonna keep babbling about Earth Spear, but if you have any other questions, please let me know. I don't mind at all. Switching topics a little bit, and if you want, I can also. I don't want to talk too much about Saucery without like spending more time just going over the fight to make sure that I have my information sort of straight in my head. But if that's something you'd be interested in talking about more in the future, I can definitely add it to like a list of topics. I have a excuse me. I have a couple of other topics lined up. Like I do want to eventually make my way through the full debate. But this is closing in on like hour 6 of streaming over the past couple of weeks, and I am this far into the debate. So I don't need to necessarily do it all at once. I lose my mind if I try to do that. So happy to switch around. Oh, red sand, is that what the magnetic sand is called? I forgot the name of it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, like, I like Kakuzu as a character. I kind of am like appreciative that Noodles, at the very least, like he should be credited with revitalizing interest in Kakuzu. I think a lot of people probably looked at him, and like I know some people who I've talked to who he is their favorite character, hands down. But I don't think he was regarded super highly in the community. And then like even though I disagree with like most of what Noodle says about him, I have learned more about Kakuzu since those debates, and I think more people are more familiar with him and his abilities since those debates. So I have to like acknowledge that at least. Oh, Saucery of the Red Sand. I see. You're right. Right. Well, see, that just goes to show you that I'm not up to date on my Saucery lore, unfortunately. Although I do have to say, there's some. You know what? Fuck it. 1 second. You know offhand what chapter that fight is in? If not, I think I can find it pretty readily. It's got to be around 270 or something, right? But I will say that like one of my favorite panels in the series is probably, oh yeah, here we go. That's a lucky guess. Is like this. Like this is just absolutely terrifying. I actually want to go back one more to when he summons the shapes in the first place, right? So yeah, these needles, that's another thing too, right? Like, can Kakuzu perceive and respond to these needles in time? Maybe he could, not sure though. A lot of the context for this fight too is that, like, these characters are prepared specifically to counter Sasori and are still extremely hard pressed, and then arguably Sasori like lets them win in the end, right? Like, he could have killed them over and over again throughout the fight. He doesn't like let them have the win for free, but at the very end he does let them kill him, I think, which I don't think he would be as willing to do with Kakuzu. But like, this panel here, there's something that's just so like beautiful and terrifying about the simplicity of these shapes. It was kind of like looming up and taking up the whole panel, and I don't know, you can see like the fear and shock. Like, Sakura doesn't even know what she's looking at. She's shaking, which is what makes Sakura's like feat here like so cool. This is such an awesome moment for her, and maybe people would disagree. I feel like she peaks as a character here, which is really sad. Like, when I first read through this, I was so excited about, like, okay, where is where is Sakura gonna go from here? If this is how cool she is now, and we're only on chapter 269, then then where is she gonna go, 10 years from now, or however long it is until the end of the series? And I don't know. I think this is the best she ever did. But then the ability of this like sand element here, this object, to just reshape itself and just act in a way that almost looks like it's got its own physics, its own properties. It's terrifying. These things are huge, and they're just sending her flying. And we know the whole time that not only are they massive and terrifying in and of themselves, but they are amalgamations of sand, and the sand doesn't need to be like grouped together to be really scary and really dangerous as well. It could split up at any time. So despite its simplicity, it also is just like a very complex threat, if that makes sense. And look at this feat for Sakura too. So here's something you could say, right? Sakura she's using chakra probably to reinforce her fist here, but she probably doesn't, I mean, like, unless this glove is armored, she doesn't have anything that's comparable to the extra defense that Kakuzu gets. So again, got Sasuke on the brain. If Sakura can do this, then Kakuzu could probably do that too, and push that back. But I mean, again, like, what is Sasori doing this whole time, right? He's just kind of hanging out, and okay, no, he is actively okay, he's being active in the fight. So she fights back, and he's surprised by it. It's not like he's just hanging out. Okay, so I mean, he is trying. He's holding up. I guess if you don't think that Sakura is impressive, then you could use the fact that Sakura is succeeding against him as an anti-feat. But I look at it the other way, right? I think Sasori is a massive threat, and Sakura is doing this well against him, holding her own, and therefore it's a feat for Sakura. But yeah, and then this shit over here, again, like, think about the amount of time it would have taken to draw this, to make this thing come to life. All the individual bits of line work, the cloud in the background, then being sort of overwhelmed by all of these forks, the way that they spread out. This is, again, it's fucking terrifying. And I'm just imagining Kakuzu, like, standing there, like, turning on his diamond armor and being like, okay, you can't touch me. This spreads out over the whole battlefield, just like pins everything down. And if he moves, he gets like engulfed in poison. I don't know, man. This is pretty tough. But then again, Sakura did manage to survive it. So, do you think that's because Sasori was the sand is soaked in poison? Yeah. So basically, unless he can maintain Diamond Morph this entire time, then like, yeah, he's gonna get nicked by it. He's gonna get cut, and he's probably gonna be in trouble. Oh, interesting. Oh, so when Sakura breaks through, this is the third Kazekage puppet, right? Breaking the puppet itself actually makes the sand dispel. I forgot about that. That's cool. Damn it, you got me on a whole sorcery thing now. I need to go back and read this off stream. Honestly though, this is one of the top 10 fights probably in the series. Like I don't know. I don't want to settle on a specific number, but it's just there's so much going on here and there's so much like happening for this character. There's so much artistry, there's so many like twists and turns and surprises. Even this, like, it just keeps the way that he stands on the cable here and it's coming out of him, it's like a part of him. It's just, yeah, it's peak. I love this fight so much. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get back into it and go over it again. So yeah, I think for now I'm gonna take the stance that Sasori beats Kakuzu. I'll go back and say that I do like Kakuzu. I think he's fun. I think I think he was wasted, honestly. I think that, you know, Kishimoto had a lot going on. If you know anything about the experience of what it was like for him to make the comic, like, I've heard that he basically put his honeymoon on hiatus for, or like didn't take his honeymoon for 20 years because he was just crunching, like working overtime for like 20 years straight. And there's only so much you can do. He was like hospitalized and still working on the manga, like while these chapters, like some of these chapters were happening. So it's brutal. Like the life of a mangaka is brutal and thankless a lot of the times. And so I'm not mad that like a couple characters didn't get enough screen time or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen him do more. I feel like he kind of showed up and was just used as like part of this overall instruction to like teach people about elements and typing advantages and all this. Like, there's a reason why we see him using multiple elements simultaneously while Naruto is using this. There's a reason why we hear Kakashi like talking about this. You know, this whole like sequence is meant to teach us about the mechanics and the magic system, for lack of a better word, of the world, and it makes sense. But then you kind of start to feel like Kakuzu was just kind of used as like a prop for that instruction a little bit. Not that that's a bad thing, but then it's like, well, I don't know. He had more potential, I think, that could have been explored later. And that's the thing, right? In the war arc, they bring him back, and so we did have an opportunity to spend more time with him and with characters like Kimimaro, and then they're just like not used very much. Like, Kakuzu doesn't really do anything in the war. He steals some hearts and then gets flattened by Choji, and then stabbed by Izumo and Kotetsu. So I guess that is pretty cool, right? Like, we have the subversion again, like I mentioned before, that that Kishimoto likes to kind of set up parallels and subvert things. So it would take me a minute to find the war arc feat, but like these two characters over here, when they pull this off, Izumo and Kotetsu, and pierce him together for a better shot. Yeah, when this happens, they manage to get Hidan, but then they are obviously defeated by Hidan and Kakuzu. And then later in the war arc, they eventually get, they do this same thing to Kakuzu and get revenge. So I think that's pretty cool. Oh, hey, Dr. Pest, how's it going, man? I'm very glad. Thank you very much for the kind words. I appreciate it. I'm glad I can provide some entertainment. No worries if your English is not very clear. That's not a problem at all. I can understand a little bit of Spanish. Sorry that I can't speak it fluently. Or I would try to switch a little bit. If you can speak Italian, I can try that, but I haven't spoken in a long time. But it's cool. I appreciate you stopping by. Are you celebrating anything over the holidays? Are you having a nice break? Hopefully you're getting a chance to rest and relax a little bit. So yeah, I'll see if I can, actually probably can't find it quickly, so let me see 1 second, because it would be kind of cool to show. Maybe you already know what I'm referring to, but sometimes the Naruto wiki is actually pretty good about like having sources. So, Pain's assault. Oh, yeah, okay, actually, got lucky. So, again, like, after losing Asuma to Kakuzu and Hidan, later in the war, they do bring Kakuzu back, and they do manage to pull this off on him again. So, we have... This is actually very satisfying, right? This is in chapter, what, like 550, 560, something like that. Unfortunately, they don't seem to have a source here for that. But this is, you know, obviously several hundred chapters, several years in real time, in our time, in the future. And we've now finally gotten a conclusion to this. And I like that. So, but again... You could argue that Kakuzu was again made into a prop for these two characters. I don't know. I think it's open to interpretation. All of this is just to say that I'm gonna spend a lot of time on stream dunking on Kakuzu and like kind of disagreeing with feats for him, but I like him, and I think like he's a well-designed character. He's got compelling abilities. He represents a very significant and tangible threat in the world. I like the fact, I like his like philosophy and like his take on money and stuff like that. I like that we have somebody who has kind of a neutral, cold, calculating ideology. Yeah, I do like his duo with Hidan and the way that they kind of play off of one another. I think that's very well written. But potentially they could have explored more. I guess I'll talk about this briefly because this is something that's come up in multiple debates. There is an entry in the third data book that says something to the effect that Kakuzu is like a master genius because he's been alive since the time of the first Hokage. You know, he's a cold, calculating, experienced assassin and all that stuff, right? And supposedly he's a genius level intellect to rival Shikamaru. And I think it's deliberate that he winds up facing Shikamaru twice and their sort of intellects are paired against one another. But when Naruto shows up, he kind of acts really stupid. So Naruto, the first thing he does... Oh, wait, I think I got a message. He earned it, losing to diversion tactics that even he... Yeah, exactly. He himself is good at like doing things like burying his hearts under the ground and using that to kind of create an opportunity to free himself from certain jutsu. And he can also like use like his own death and resurrection as a way to get a one-up on Kakashi, all that stuff, right? But when he's face to face with a disheveled teenager, Naruto makes shadow clones right in front of his face. Let's just pull that up. It'll just take a second. I also noticed, like, I've been trying to pay more attention to the sound effects, to the onomatopoeias that are used, and Kerblast gets used a lot. Which I think is kind of funny. Baroomble is another one that shows up a lot. Must be fun to be the person who kind of comes up with those. Okay, so here we go. Naruto makes shadow clones right in front of him, staring right at him. Kakuzu's just standing still. Naruto dashes forward while yelling, right, and being very obvious. He does this thing which is sort of clever, where he tries to kind of move in and through some kunai, and okay, so Kakuzu dodges the kunai. He gets caught. Right? Very, very obvious maneuver. And it's clear that Kakuzu isn't really taking things seriously, right? Or doesn't, in my interpretation, I don't think Kakuzu felt super threatened by that. He's like, whatever, you're never going to win that way, right? Kind of dismisses him. What does Naruto do next? Naruto makes 3 shadow clones directly in front of his face. Again, right? And he then makes the Rasen Shuriken directly in front of his face. A really, really, really loud jutsu. And in case anybody... So this is something that came up in one of the debates. I think it was Noodles. Oh, yeah. Actually, if you've seen the debate between Noodles and Swag on Kakuzu versus Pain, at one point, Swag talks about the Rasen Shuriken being super, super loud and sounding like a nuclear bomb explosion going off. And I disagree with like the magnitude of that claim. Obviously, it's not that huge or that loud. But the Noodle says, oh, no. Like, it's only loud in the anime. You can't prove that it's loud in the manga. Like, that's just an anime thing. So, no. It's very clearly loud. This sound effect over here, this ween, this is like a high-pitched whining sound, Choji even says that it's got high-pitched vibrations, right? And he's like not standing right next to Naruto. It's got a ween over here as well. So the reason why the anime has the sound design that it does is because it's meant to be an auditory representation of what we are being shown here. The best thing that the manga has, since it can't play sound effects obviously, is to use onomatopoeia. And I also love how the words themselves aren't just written out just blandly. They're stylized, right? They're meant to kind of give us a sense of like the contour or the timbre of the sound. And this is very clearly a high-pitched, unstable, like loud, kind of threatening noise. So Naruto does that in front of... we see it also for the Rasengan as well. So Naruto does this right in front of Kakuzu. Kakuzu sees whatever this is, like some stones or whatever, getting disintegrated, and is like, I cannot be touched by this. This will be very, very bad. I cannot be hurt by this, right? So he knows he doesn't want to get hit by it. Also, this onomatopoeia over here, shwoo, right, that should indicate that it's pretty loud as well. It's only getting larger and louder. So, moving on, what happens next? Naruto dashes at him again with 3 shadow clones, very, very obviously, very loudly, shouting the name of his jutsu, right? And he has one of them go to the side. So Kakuzu should be able to see this. It's the super loud, like, very, presumably it's like bright and colorful, right? Maybe not. But he is looking directly at him, and he's already identified this is the threatening thing. I don't give a shit about these shadow clones. I was already attacked by the shadow clones. They did nothing to me, and I know they can't beat me. This is the thing I have to worry about. So what does he do in anticipation of that threat? He lets these... I love this over here because I don't know what the hell Naruto is even doing here. He's just like sailing through the air and flipping, and he's like coming in like butt first. Like I don't even know. Anyway, so I guess he was trying to do this like a frontal like flip attack. Kakuzu manages to grab him. The other one comes in from behind with the kunai. He manages to blast both of them away. Okay, so congratulations, Kakuzu. You have allowed the 3 things that you already know aren't threatening in order to take up your full attention, and you used 2 simultaneous jutsu on those 2 shadow clones that you know aren't real people and you know aren't a real threat. And in so doing, you lost track of the thing that you know is the biggest threat. Now he notices it, and he's not fast enough to fully turn around and to get out of the way. And Naruto would have killed him right here if this hadn't fiddled out. If this had touched him, Kakuzu would have lost those 2 hearts, right? He would have been done. So, one thing that you could take away from this is that if Kakuzu, despite what he said to Naruto, despite saying, oh, you'll never win that way, he sees that Naruto is coming at him with the shadow clones with kunai, and he decides, okay, I am actually going to take this as a serious threat, and I'm going to blast this Naruto away, which you could interpret that as Kakuzu is telling us that even though he boasted that to Naruto, he still thinks these kunai are dangerous. He still thinks that Naruto could potentially do some damage with the kunai. If he didn't care about him at all, if he thought it was going to be like a mosquito like bumping up against him or something like that, then why would he have taken the time to try to get them out of the way, unless they were just a nuisance, right? That's open for interpretation, but that could be a clue as to how Kakuzu feels about the durability of his own, like, threads when he doesn't have Diamond Morph on. 1 second. Excuse me. But we're almost done talking about Kakuzu. So now our genius over here decides to try to take Naruto's heart, which makes sense. He's obviously identified Naruto as a smart person worthy of taking his heart. That's totally fine. He manages to deal with Kakashi, or like he doesn't manage to stop Kakashi from freeing Naruto, but he is being pressed by Kakashi and Yamato at the same time. So I wouldn't necessarily like bully him for that. It's a fair thing. However, interesting again, like he decides to dash away from these things as opposed to just like blasting them apart. So something that'll come up in the debate sometimes is a claim will get made that Kakuzu would just destroy the whole battlefield or just blow everything away, right? If he could do that, why isn't he doing it here? Is it because he knows that the wood style can absorb his attacks or negate them? Does he feel that way? Like, why is he deciding to do this? Maybe he's just being prudent and just dumping away out of reflex. That's also a valid interpretation. There doesn't need to be a complicated interpretation necessarily, but it's worth looking for like little clues like this as to why our characters acting a certain way in context, if that makes sense. So anyway, all this is just to say about Kakuzu's intelligence. So Kakuzu does acknowledge the problem here. Looks like he's using. Looks like his jutsu is useless so long as I keep my distance. Okay, so he's gonna play it defensively. That's smart, right? That's intelligent. Keep his eye on the real body. And then what happens? Well, spoiler alert, it's gonna look a lot like what just happened previously. So I love this panel. This is so cool. You can see his so maybe this is me reading into it too much, but if you notice that his headband actually falls apart, I think that is a kind of a nice way to underscore the fact that he's like abandoning more and more of his humanity, and the like killing intent and the murderous like bloodlust inside of him is pushing away and pushing away the semblance of the shinobi or the samurai, excuse me, that he is. If you look in the data book, in the third data book, there's a statement that like Kakuzu still like he says to Hidan at one point. Like Hidan is basically like babbling about something, and Kakuzu says, "Enough, Hidan. The mission is absolute. We must follow orders." Like he has it's like a side of his personality that is very focused on like order and tradition and honor and code of conduct and stuff like that. And that's the samurai side of himself that's still alive. But then underneath that is this horrific, like bloodthirsty monster that's like barely human anymore, that's lived way longer than anybody in his position should. And I like the idea of this falling onto the ground as like a visual metaphor of, okay, he's like totally abandoned his humanity. He's like going all out and just becoming the beast. So he is preparing for Naruto's jutsu. He is amping himself up with chakra. He's not being totally stupid, but he still stands there and just lets him make shadow clones again, and lets him make the Rasen Shuriken again. I mean, like, he doesn't try to use any of his long-range attacks. He says he's in long-range mode, but he doesn't really do anything. And then what happens? Naruto comes at him with the 3 shadow clones, again in an incredibly obvious maneuver. And this time he's learned from his past mistake, right? This time he's like, okay, I can go for the one that's holding the Rasen Shuriken. But he doesn't prepare for the possibility that maybe like Naruto would come at him from behind, that Naruto would have like a contingency. He completely loses track of all the other ones. So the first time he only focused on the shadow clones, and this time he only focused on what he thinks is the real body. And I don't know, is somebody who's like one of the greatest geniuses in the whole series, was like this supreme intellect, couldn't have come up with like a single alternate plan, like a single contingency, maybe hide one of his hearts, maybe just like create a diversion. I don't know. This could be a case of like, nitpicky fans could be like trying to, like myself, could be trying to rewrite the story. And maybe I'm being unfair. I just think that statements to the effect that he is like, some kind of incomparable genius, like on Shikamaru's level, to me, they don't hold up when you look at what happens in the sequence. Okay, so that being said, kind of went off on a tangent there, but I like kind of diving into stuff. So if you have any questions or anything that you're curious about, or anything that I said that you disagree with, like feel free at any time to kind of dive in and let me know. Happy to address anything you guys might be curious about or wondering about. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to talking a little bit more about Diamond Morph, to then go on to the dog, because the dog summon is something I do want to spend some time on. So I think we've well enough established that let's see, does he actually say that here? No, I was trying to find that line from Kakuzu. I think we've established pretty effectively, hopefully, that Diamond Morph is powerful and it's a serious threat, and it definitely confers upon Kakuzu like a strong defensive and offensive advantage. It does have the disadvantage, however, of meaning that like whatever body part he's hardened cannot effectively move while it is hard. So all of this is meant to contribute to a discussion about Kakuzu versus Pain, after all. And Pain has access to the animal path, which in turn has access to a variety of summons. Specifically, I want to like list out the summons real quick, so I'll just take a second. The animal path has the dog, the bird, the centipede, the ox, the rhino, the chameleon, the crustacean, and am I missing another one? Oh, and the panda, right? So these are all the different summons that it can do. It can also summon the other paths of pain, and it can also do Conan. So far, to kind of refresh people's memory about the debate, so far we've talked about the chameleon, and we briefly talked about the crustacean, aka the crab. And now I want to talk a little bit more about the dog. So when the dog is first summoned, we talked about this briefly last time, so I'll just keep it short. Like, when the dog is first summoned during the Jiraiya versus Pain fight, we see that it has 3 heads to start off with, okay? And we learn later, and I'll pull up that chapter, that the dog multiplies and gains more heads every time it gets hit, right? Let me see if I can, yeah, here we go. So this statement from Nagato, this is in chapter 550 or 551. Let me see one sec. 549. So here's when KCM Naruto is fighting against Nagato, Edo Nagato, and Nagato specifically says he multiplies every time you hit him. You've got to knock me out first, okay? So going back to the fight here, here's the dog summon. It's got 3 heads. Jiraiya says he saw the berry and switched to a strong lead defensive critter, or offensive critter rather. Okay, so I have an interpretation of what is happening here. It's a little unclear, but we're in the Rain Village, and we know that the Rain Village is made up of these kind of steel structures, metal structures. I think they're steel. We could dispute that potentially. And when they're torn apart, you can see that it looks like metal on the outside, but then with like some reinforced concrete and tubing on the outside, or maybe that's the other way around. Maybe some of these are concrete tubes with metal reinforcement. Either way, they appear to be pretty strong structures. Here's Gamaken, and this structure is strong enough to hold his weight, and Jiraiya's as well. So clearly they are robust, and yet the dog appears to be just slashing through them. Now, you could say, oh, well, how do we know that it's not Gamaken or Jiraiya slashing through them? It's possible, but here we have the dog, and we notice something very, very obvious is that it's gained a whole lot more heads. And since we know that it gains more heads when it gets clobbered, when it gets hit, then that means that Jiraiya and Gamaken would have been attacking the dog. And also, when... well, I mean, obviously they're attacking the dog. They're fighting, right? But like, also, it seems like they're all splitting up, right? So they're not necessarily attacking as this giant composite dog the whole time. They're also splitting up into individual things. And so when you put individual dogs, rather, when you put all that together, I could be wrong. There could be other ways of looking at this, but I think it's reasonable to assume that Jiraiya and Gamaken are in here and are basically like playing defense and trying to swat the dogs away as they come, and every time they're hit, they split up, and while they are split up, they are capable of punching through these steel walls. Now, whether you think it's like the one dog the whole time, or sometimes it's the one dog and sometimes they split up, I think it's more likely to be the second based on what Jiraiya said, which means that even the small dogs probably have the ability to punch through steel. So in order for them to do that, their claws have to be really sharp and really hard, and that is something that should be taken into account, I think, when discussing their offensive capability. They could also potentially be chewing through it with their jaws. Probably more likely that they're slashing, I think, but who knows. Now, it's also possible that Gamaken is doing some of this damage too, right? But you can also notice that Gamaken himself seems to be, I don't know if he's really wounded, he's dirty, But if we go on a little further, we see that when Gamaken is fighting them, he seems to be pretty competent at like hitting them physically, as opposed to like slashing away at the environment around him. He does embed his man catcher, whatever the term for this is, in the wall, but doesn't seem to like be ripping through it. I mean, he stabs into it, it goes in a little bit. But then the dog sends him sailing through the air. So this dog, which is just one of them, right? It's not the whole one altogether. This little dog here has enough power behind it to displace Gamaken's mass and push him this far and send him moving this far, this fast. How far, how fast? We could do a calc to try to figure that out. But the point is, he's strong enough, just one of them, to send him moving through the air. Then the bird hits him and he kind of falls on the ground and he is hurt. So it's a little difficult to determine exactly how much Gamaken was hurt by this strike from the dog versus the strike from the bird and like the impact from the ground, like how much momentum is being transferred into him before he hits the ground and all that, right? Hard to kind of isolate that, but it's important to kind of keep all this stuff in mind, because a statement will be made in this debate that the dog has no feats. The dog has no feats, right? He's got no speed feats. He's got no strength feats. We just can't know how strong he is. Well, no, I disagree with that. We can get an idea of how strong he is by looking at what he does. And he does actually fight. He doesn't just like get summoned and then take a shit in the rug and then leave. He does things in the fight. So for context, why am I even talking about Gamaken? Well, there's a statement that Gamaken is equivalent in strength to Gamabunta. And so I want to go back and look at what happens between Gamabunta and Shukaku. We talked about this a couple stream ago, but I still think it's worth bringing up. Here's Shukaku, here's Gamabunta. Let's just go over what happens very quickly. So Gamabunta, Shukaku, this is Gaara's consciousness controlling Shukaku, right? He's like in quote-unquote Biju mode. So Gamabunta sees Shukaku. Shukaku perceives that Gamabunta is coming, has this reaction to it, but is not fast enough to fully like block the attack or dodge it, because he's kind of like, you know, he's a chunky boy. He's like standing in place. He raises his arms up. He's like clearly trying to engage with him, but he's not fast enough. Gamabunta manages to, in a single slash, cut through Shukaku's arm. So and there it goes. It not just that, not just like wound him, send it sailing, like flying away, into the distance. What does he say? Didn't he say something about like it was really hard to cut through it? Oh yeah, here we go. What a tough fellow. He's so solid. I barely managed to pull out the slash, but he does it. So after that, I want to talk about the air bullets again real quick. So here Shukaku uses his air bullets, and you can notice that they're kind of tearing through the forest. Here we have Gamabunta using his water bullets. They combine together and they basically form rain, which is crazy. The amount of chakra that's being packed into these attacks is insane. They can like barely believe it. And then Shukaku is able to hurt, not kill. I think, yeah, he hurts Gamabunta quite a bit, because first of all, we see all this like blood splatter, and second of all, you can see like he's got blood coming off of his fingers. So, but then again, over here, he's just kind of like dirty, kind of like bruised. He is actually bleeding. Okay, that did actually hurt him a lot. So putting that together, what can we say about the relationship between the dog and I think I can move this for now, about the dog versus versus not Kakuzu yet. I think, I don't want to put it. Yeah, so how does the dog summon compare to Shukaku, actually, right? So Shukaku versus, because if we consider that Gamaken and Gamabunta are essentially interchangeable, like we're told they have about the same strength, about the same stats or whatever, if we accept that to be true, then how do the two compare? Well, the dog was able to punch through steel and was able to knock Gamaken back and press him and cause him to have to like act defensively, I guess you could put. like basically kick him so hard that he goes like or like bite him whatever so hard that he goes flying through the air like that. We don't know exactly how much he wounds him or damages him because the shield and the impact, but it's enough to put him in that position. Compare that to Shikaku over here. Gamabunta is able to cut off Shikaku's arm, and so he does more damage to his opponent, but he winds up also getting more wounded. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. You can't just like swap these characters out verbatim and have them be entirely equivalent. But it's fair to say that Shikaku pressed Gamabunta and Gamabunta pressed Shikaku. So in some ways, they're relative. It's also fair to say that the dog pressed Gamaken, and Gamaken was able to hold his own against the dog, but ultimately did get overwhelmed. So, by a slightly iffy scaling relativity thing, I think it's fair to say that the dog is comparable in some ways in terms of its capabilities to Shikaku. Does that mean he would win in a fight against Shikaku? No, I don't think so. Does it mean that overall, like, he has the same abilities in Jutsu, and that he's as much of a threat as Shikaku, just at face value? No, not necessarily. He can't use air bullets or whatever. He doesn't have like a massive sandy like appendages and stuff like that, but he has other things that make him just as big of a threat in his own way, and I would argue probably more of a threat, seeing as Pain tells us, he can't die. Like, he's not going to stop ever. He's just going to get, it's like a Hydra, right? You cut off one head and two more appear. There's nothing you can do unless you take out the summoner. So pound for pound, it's funny because dogs and pounds, never mind. Pound for pound, the dog is in some ways, in some matchups, in some situations, potentially a bigger threat than Shikaku. Not that Shikaku isn't a significant threat in and of himself. So with that being established, very quickly want to go over another quick feat that we have for the dog. This is more of a durability feat. This is in chapter 425. And in chapter 425, this is during the assault on Konoha. This is after the fight between the Devapath, Tendo Pain, and Kakashi. And here we have 4 Anbu members, and they're going up against the dog, and they're able to slash and cut its paw, as well as establishing a lightning pillar trap. So they're using a lightning jutsu that is clearly kind of a big deal. I mean, look, it's got all these like obelisks that are shooting lightning. The dog is clearly affected by it. He doesn't seem too pleased by what's happening. This jutsu, which I really wish we learned more about, because when it's such a throwaway thing, it just happens in like a couple panels and then it's never mentioned again. But these Anbu members essentially open up like a portal in the air, like a black hole or something. It looks like a void, and it just drops this massive stone pig out of nowhere, and it's clearly huge, right? But the dog, despite having been electrocuted, despite having been like sliced apart with its legs, like hamstrung or whatever, and despite having this massive essentially like a small mountain, not, that's an exaggeration, but you know, like something the size of a large building dropped directly on him, doesn't seem deterred at all. He just gets right back up and pushes it off. So if you cannot look at this and say that the dog has no feats, that he has 0 feats, right? This is a feat. Now, whether or not you think it's relevant to whatever discussion you're having or relative to whatever matchup you're discussing, that's fine. You don't have to agree with that. But saying that it has no feats is just not true. It's not accurate. And this feat over here is a strength feat, right? It has the ability to push this giant stone thing off. That giant stone thing weighs a certain amount of weight, and so to push it requires a certain amount of force. So this is a strength feat for the dog, and especially since it's just like kind of shoving it off to the side while attacking forward, it's a pretty significant strength feat. It's not like winded and exhausted, it just blows it apart. Not blows it apart, it like shrugs it off is the phrase I'm looking for. Same thing with this, right? Its ability to endure this lightning attack without getting shredded apart. Think about Hedon, right? If Hedon got cut by this, he wouldn't die. But if if he were in the middle of this, he might get like bisected or have his head cut off or arms cut off. That doesn't mean he would actually die because he's got immortality, but he would still, obviously get wounded, get cut apart. The the dog is fine. He's just immediately back up. Even if he did lose a limb or something, it must have regenerated or regrown or whatever, because here he is, and he's right back at it. But you know what I think is actually kind of interesting about the design is that I wonder why this decision was made. If you look at the stake here that's going through, like the chakra rod stake that's going through his upper jaw, it's making contact with his bottom lip, but with his tongue rather. If he were to close his mouth, it feels like that stake would drive through his tongue and his lower jaw, and it seems like maybe that's what's happening with the other ones. So, but clearly they can open their jaws when they need to. It's just a strange design. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but like it looks like his jaw should basically be trapped in place. Maybe it's just a perspective thing. I don't know. Obviously, Pain wants them to be able to slash away at stuff. Okay. So like he's got like the one little paw over here is just peeking over. It's kind of cute. And the expression on the rhino's face. Yeah, so I think those are the basics of what I wanted to talk about with the dog summon. The other thing here, I mentioned before, this is the last thing before we actually get back to the debate, is that I want us to look very carefully at what actually happens here with Naruto. He's in KCM1 mode. He's using his Rasen Shuriken, and it's actively pushing the dog into the ground. And the dog is upset about it. He's being held in place, but he's not getting torn apart like Hidan would, right? In the previous example, he's not having the heads ripped off or anything like that. He's just kind of being temporarily held in place. Let's look at yeah, so Naruto is then standing on top of him afterwards. I wasn't clear about this, but he's actually standing on the dog after the fact. If I can find another shot of that. I know we looked at this the other day. So the dog's fur was not even damaged, right? Like, he's not bleeding. He doesn't have a hole in him. He hasn't like had a part of him gouged out or ripped. The fur on his body hasn't even like been shredded or disintegrated or like discolored or burned or anything. Like, he's just standing right on him and he's fine. Then eventually the Amaterasu seems to hurt him, and maybe you could argue that it's implied that the Amaterasu does actually take him out because we don't see him after this. It could be that Kabuto has like gets rid of it or something like that. I'm not sure. I would like to think that they're not just like writhing around in pain and like setting the entire forest on fire. Maybe Obito was a little bit more, or not Obito, Kabuto was a little bit more prudent than that. But if you wanna say the Amaterasu just like takes him out, then okay. But here, he's fine, right? His back section has not been bisected or obliterated. We know that the Rasen Shuriken can cut things. So and like its internal organs, right, should be damaged. That's the other thing. I know people have made, like Parrot and Noodles have made this point about like the Rasen Shuriken ignoring durability or whatnot. If it ignores durability and it attacks on a cellular level, it should be shredding the insides of this thing up like crazy. But we don't see any evidence of that either. It's not like coughing up blood or anything. It's fine. It's just upset. So you cannot say that the dog has no strength feats. You cannot say it has no speed feats. You cannot say that it has no durability feats, because it clearly has all of those things. Now, as to, again, how any of that is relevant in any given debate or any discussion or matchup that you might have, that is, the burden of proof is on whoever's arguing for Pain to demonstrate how any of that is relevant or how any of that matters, where it scales to, in other words. But, and you'll find that if you listen to me talk for any length of time, you'll find that one of my big things is that, like, we can disagree about pretty much anything, but what I want to encourage is, or the only thing that I'm, like, very hard opposed to with this stuff is, like, when people say, oh, you just can't know, like, you're not allowed to look into that, you're not allowed to have an opinion, it's unknowable, it's unquantifiable, like, let's not even talk about it, right? Shutting down discussion and discouraging other people from looking into things and like finding ways to appreciate it, that sort of stuff, I feel is just like antithetical to the whole like point of why we even do this. And so at any opportunity that I have, I'm going to argue against it, even if that means like arguing like, hey, I'm going to encourage you to go look up something that is in direct opposition to what I think is true. Please go do that if it's going to mean that you're going to learn more about the series. Okay, so with all that being said, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back and we're going to do the debate response portion. It's probably going to take up maybe another hour, see how things go. Yeah, be back in like 5 minutes. Okay, so I thank you again for the questions and the engagement. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I have done an okay job of kind of going over Diamond Morph as an ability and how it works at a baseline and what kind of strengths and advantages it gives Kakuzu, as well as talking a little bit about the dog. And with that hopefully being established, I'd like to go to the debate now, and we're gonna basically focus on a pretty small part of it, basically taking off where we are, picking up where we left off last time. And again, I want to focus as much as I can on just what are the arguments being made for the for each character and how well are they being established. I acknowledge that there is room for interpretation. I don't know if there's like, I don't need anybody to go home at night like being 100% sure that one character beats the other. But what I would like to advocate for is trying to understand why and how some of these arguments succeed and why they don't, if that makes sense. So I guess there's probably no more I can really say about it other than just diving into it. So let's go back to the debate. As a reminder, this is a debate between Noodles and WeaabooWarrior on Kakuzu versus Pain. Noodles is taking Kakuzu and WeaabooWarrior is taking Pain. I would ask that you please go and watch this full debate. It is my favorite Naruto debate on the platform. I think that you will get something out of it if you like Naruto, if you like debates, if you like Naruto debates, if you like power scaling, if you just like these characters and want to learn more about them. This debate is one of the rare ones that has decent audio quality throughout. It is well articulated, relatively. It doesn't really get heated. There's none of the kind of raging out that happens in a lot of these discussions. So I would highly recommend it. That being said, I do disagree passionately with a lot of the stuff that was said, but I look at that as an opportunity to learn more and to have discussions. So I think that's enough housekeeping out of the way. Let's just pick off where we left off and see what's said.
I think is the regenerating dog.
Okay.
This dog has the speed feats to keep up with Gamakin, who's, like I said, is equal with Gamabunta. He tags and hurts him, so he could damage him. And Tailed Beast showed that Gamabunta could take Tailed Beast hits and keep fighting, even though it did hurt him. So, well,
yeah, like we kind of went over before. Both of those characters are capable of being, or like take damage from their like respective opponents, and that indicates to me that there is some connection between them, some amount of relativity there.
Well, the dog's definitely below Tailed Beast. Is at a point where it could hurt people that could take Tailed Beast attacks.
I don't know that we necessarily have to assume that the dog is below Tailed Beast. Depending on how you view our scaling previously, right? Like if Gamabunta is relative to a Tailed Beast, doesn't mean he's relative to all of them, right? All of the Tailed Beasts have their own strengths and weaknesses. But if Gamabunta is Tailed Beast level, whatever that means, and Gamaken is relative to Gamabunta, and Gamaken is hurt by the dog, then the dog would also, by that chain, be Tailed Beast level. Now, what exactly that means, Tailed Beast level, that's a very vague term, can be disputed. But again, like, fucking Datara takes out Isobu, the Three Tails, with one bomb. How do you think, like, is there an argument that Isobu on land could lose to this dog, especially if it doesn't have a Jinchuriki in it, right? Do you think the dog could pull it off, especially given that the dog is endlessly regenerating? What would Isobu do to it? Would a Biju Bomb be enough to take it out? Probably not, since we saw that thing with the Rasen Shuriken, right? So it's worth considering that terms like Biju level or whatever, I'll get to that later, are not necessarily super accurate, but also they can be useful shorthand in helping us like draw connections between characters.
So at the very least, I think
We'll think about the scaling this way. Kakuzu is not able to be damaged by perfect Jinchuriki.
Okay. So we're getting to this already.
So we have Kakuzu at the top, then perfect Jinchuriki, then regular Biju, right? Just the Biju's full power, which is about Shikaku level. And then below that, we have Gamabunta, Gamaken, and the dog summon.
Okay, so I actually tried to draw this out before. Sometimes like mapping things out visually can help me, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you too. I want to just try to summarize what was just said, and as I go, see if you can spot any problems with it. Noodles said that Kakuzu cannot be harmed by perfect Jinchuriki. Now notice he didn't say a perfect Jinchuriki or specifically Yukito, but let's actually make a little note here, right? So, alright, one sec. It's probably easier if I just do, nope, I do this. Okay, so Yukito, because he's using Yukito as his point of reference, right? So Kakuzu cannot be harmed by perfect Jinchuriki because he wasn't harmed by Yukito. Then perfect Jinchuriki, there's an implication that perfect Jinchuriki are stronger than regular Jinchuriki, right? That was established by the debaters previously. They think that if you are a perfect Jinchuriki, you're just in a higher tier than regular Jinchuriki. And therefore you are stronger than regular Biju and regular Biju. And then there's this subsidiary claim that regular Biju are around Shukaku's level. And then if you're below that, you're in the tier of Gamabunta, Gamaken, and the dog, right? So Gamabunta is equivalent to Gamaken. Gamaken was hurt by the dog. So the dog is below regular Biju level. Therefore, the dog cannot hurt Kakuzu. Now, if we accept that all of those statements are true and accurate, then it is a syllogism or like a logical sequence that does kind of follow. It's a well-constructed logical sequence. Here's my problem. Kakuzu cannot be harmed by perfect Jinchuriki. Let's take a look at the Yugito fight real quick. It's a few chapters back. In no way, in my opinion, have the debaters established that Kakuzu cannot be hurt by any and all of Yugito's attacks. To my finding, they haven't even established, I should say Noodles, because it's not Weeaboo's job. Noodles hasn't even established definitively that Kakuzu was not hurt by what Yugito did. What we see here, and this is in chapter 313 if you can't see on the top of the screen, right? So what we see happen is that Kakuzu sees Yugito's paw strike incoming. He perceives it. He anticipates it and raises his hands, and he is then smashed down into the ground. So how much damage did he take? Did he lose one of his hearts? Did his arms snap apart? Did he use diamond morph in his shoulders or in his back or in his legs to kind of brace himself? We don't know, right? We're not really told much about it. He's just sort of able to he's able to make contact with the paw, and some would say that he's able to stop it. I don't know if he actually stops it or if he just connects with it and then it immediately pushes him down. Because we're just seeing like a freeze frame, essentially, like a snapshot rather, of him making contact with it. So maybe you say he pauses it, he like cancels out the momentum of it, and then he gets pushed further down. You could also interpret this validly, I think, as he puts himself in the path of the oncoming paw swipe jutsu or braces himself against it, but he doesn't stop it at all. It just smashes him down to the ground. Okay, so now the fireball attack. Fireball attack is not aimed at Kakuzu. As far as we know, he's like down in the earth somewhere over there. It's aimed at Hidan. Okay, Hidan jumps out of the way. Okay, now we don't see Kakuzu here either. And then what's the next thing we see? A bunch of damage to the surrounding area. Hidan has used his ritual. She is nearly dead, not totally dead. And Kakuzu is just kind of standing there. Or sitting there, rather. Reading a map, I guess. So, he is not visibly damaged. So, it can be tempting to say that he didn't get hurt by Yugito's attack. And I would probably intuitively agree with that statement. However, we know that he can lose a heart and be fine afterwards. We know that he can, be dead, quote unquote, temporarily, and then kind of come back after, like, quote unquote, resurrecting himself as well. And he's had 30 minutes after the battle to sit there and heal up, essentially, to recover while Hidan does a stupid ritual. So is it fair, looking at all this stuff, do you think it's fair to say that Kakuzu cannot be damaged by perfect Jinchuriki? Do you think that statement follows from this? Or is it more fair to say that Kakuzu wasn't perceivably damaged by Yugito's paw strike? I think that second thing is a whole lot more accurate and a whole lot more fair. I think the first thing is a lot of assumptions that are being baked into one. I think you could say that, okay, well, clearly Hidan and Kakuzu would have continued to fight Yugito. Yugito would have used multiple attacks on him. And I would probably agree that intuitively that makes sense. But again, what exactly did Kakuzu do to Yugito over the course of this fight, and vice versa? What did Hidan do? How much of a role did each of these characters play? What attacks did Kakuzu get hit by? What attacks did he retaliate with? What did Yugito try on him? What abilities does Yugito have besides the ones that we see here? I know she's got a cat claw swipe attack in the war. I know she's got a rat hairball attack in the war. Did she use either of those two things? So simply making the statement that even that Yugito herself cannot damage Kakuzu is an assumption, and it's based on incomplete data. That's part one. Part two, which we talked about before, I'm not going to get into this again unless people really want me to, but Yugito has not been demonstrated to be a perfect Jinchuriki. Just because she has mastery over her Biju does not mean that she has a full amount of control and collaboration over her Biju. So this is false and this falls apart. Then there's this idea that all the perfect Jinchuriki are equal, this implication rather, which doesn't make sense either. Because the fact that Kakuzu, let's say he does take no damage from, let's say that this is true, that he can't be hurt, categorically can't be hurt by Yukito. There's a whole lot of other Biju. There's a whole lot of other Jinchuriki. And one of them in particular, not Naruto, but B, is a perfect Jinchuriki. He's the only one that we know of for sure in the series. And I want to see if I can actually find a good example of this. Just suffice it to say, while I'm looking for this, that B himself is incredibly strong and has his own abilities, including Lightning Style. And Lightning Style negates Diamond Morph. B is capable of doing this, right? B himself uses one technique that knocks out all the other Jinchuriki, right? This is the tail swipe attack. Yeah, Biju Twister, right? This is just B doing this, and he knocks out all the others. Now, granted, they were not in their full transformation form, right? But in what way are all of these characters equal? In what way do all of these characters have the exact same abilities, or can be like scaled interchangeably with one another? I'm not seeing that. I don't think that's fair to say. Especially when they actually, one second. Okay. Oh, this is something I was looking for the other day. Yeah, this is the part where Kurama says that only B and Yuki have this special relationship that's correlated with their perfect Jinchuriki status, right? I just going through this. Okay. Yeah, so let's take a look, actually, since we're talking about Yukito anyway, and we're already here. Let's just take a look at the fact that at what some of these Biju do, right? So here's Saiken, I think is his name. This guy over here. His appearance is very different. He has he's like using this acid ability, right? That's so Kokuo, the giant horse thing looking thing, has a horn, and his horn is able to hit B and like pierce him. Son Goku doesn't have that, but he's able to grab him and swing him around, which Kokuo might not be able to do. He just doesn't have that same anatomy, right? Saiken has this poison or acidic mist that he's using. We've seen Gyuki be able to, sustain damage from burns previously. Let's see if I can find where that actually happens. It's when they do the combo attack. Yeah, and here's Yukito using her like rat hairball thing. And then here's B using an electrocuted knife as well. So yeah, here's Yukito doing her dash, etc., etc. So basically, I don't know if we need to go through every single feat here. The point that I'm trying to make is that, all these characters, you want to read through this. This is in chapter 565, by the way. All these characters have different strengths and weaknesses and different abilities and different jutsu and like different levels of durability and stuff like that. So simply saying that a character is perfect Jinchuriki level and that they're therefore stronger than anybody else, or it just doesn't make any sense, right? Cannot be harmed by perfect Jinchuriki is plural, should not be plural. Jinchuriki don't all scale to each other necessarily. And then this statement about regular Biju scaling and regular Biju being around Shikaku's level. I mean, Shikaku is a Biju, right? I think by regular he means not having a Jinchuriki associated with them. So Shikaku is one of these Biju, and he does have his own strengths and weaknesses. He does have his own skills, but his anatomy is not necessarily the same as like all those other characters. He doesn't have the same stats and properties and all that, right? He doesn't have like this fire ability as an example. So how does he compare? Not inherently, right? He's got his own, but basically I'm starting to go in a loop, and I don't want to continue to just say the same thing over and over again. But so here's what I was looking for. Finally, I found it. Okay, so here's when all the Biju go into their V2 states. And when they attack B and Naruto, They go off in multiple directions, okay? One of them lands in the hand, and we get a bug bite attack, and we get a cat claws attack, and then we get leech slip, okay? So this particular character has an ability that allows him to create a corrosive acid, and so far this is the only thing that's really done damage. Cat claws hits Naruto. He's upset about it, but it doesn't seem to... Oh, I'm sorry, it's an alkaline fluid, not an acid. And it seems to make Naruto upset, but he's not bleeding, he's not wounded as far as we can tell. And then Isobu's Coral Palm attack over here actually applies this texture, this whatever this surface is, to Naruto's back, and then it's followed up by Floral Mountain, and he's basically hurt and like stuck in place and can't really do anything about it, right? So these are not all things that Shukaku can do, but Shukaku does have like the sand that was able to, when combined with Gaara anyway, was able to pierce Madara's skin, right? So I don't know, treating all these Biju as interchangeable seems inaccurate at best to me. And then this doesn't really follow either, because Gamaken and Gamabunta, right, Gamabunta is able to damage a Biju, right? So he is Biju level. He's also able to be hurt by one, but if we're going to use terms like Biju level anyway, then Gamabunta himself would be Biju level by definition of the fact that he can react to, respond to, blitz, chop through, whatever, a Biju. So he's Biju level. And if Gamaken is also Gamabunta level, and Gamaken gets hurt by the dog, then he would be the same. Right? They would all be the same level, as opposed to the dog being below regular Biju level. So all of that was in response to 5 seconds of dialogue from here. The reason that I took the time to do that is because when you encounter stuff like this, a lot of times you will hear a lot of points being made very, very quickly, and something called a gish gallop can happen. If you're not familiar with the term, it basically means a lot of points are made. Another term for that is shotgunning. A lot of points will be made very, very quickly, and they will be wrong, but they will be moved between so fast that you don't have a chance to respond to it. And there's so much wrong with what was said that it would take like 10 times longer to explain what was wrong with each statement. And now you're left in a position where like somebody said 20 wrong things and you have like a minute to address all of them, and it's going to take 20 minutes just to address the first one. And that's how they quote unquote win, by inundating you with incorrect information and then turning the burden onto you to clean up the big fucking mess. Don't fall for that. If you can avoid it, try to encourage the other person to focus on a few points at once, or one point at a time, I should say, and really go through it and understand it carefully before you move on to the next thing. Because otherwise, you're not only doing yourself a disservice, but also like anybody listening to the debate and the other person as well, just kind of skipping over things that they could potentially benefit from a deeper understanding of too. It's just a huge missed opportunity. So that took a long time. Maybe it was annoying, maybe hopefully not, but like I can understand why that might feel like too detailed or nitpicky. But I do think it's very important, not even just for this specific thing, like, oh no, they disagreed about the dog, like it's not a big deal, but the principle of it, the idea that like, you know, you're going to run into gish galloping at some point when you're talking to people about things, and I hope that this will help like create a way of dealing with it, for lack of a better phrasing.
Okay. So we got like 3 levels of scaling in between where Kakuzu's durability lies versus where the dog's at. No. So the dog would not be able to damage Kakuzu in any way.
No.
Like I said earlier,
I'll let him continue.
I have questions about that scaling, but we do have a more direct scaling, which I think would trump that scaling, which is questionable, and that's the dog summon. It takes a Rasen Shuriken from a Kurama Cloak Naruto and doesn't have its body blown apart.
Yeah, we talked about this, and I'll let him continue in just a moment. I do want to reiterate that, like, whenever you're having a conversation with somebody about this, if at all possible, share the whole page and share the whole chapter is even better, because, like, I mean, in this example, we kind of have all the information we need, but like it's always better to see things in context and with as much detail as possible.
It does get bodied though, doesn't it? Like...
Yeah, but Nagato does say,
So that again, kind of irritates me. Like, it does get bodied. I mean, that's not. You'll hear that term a lot. It doesn't really mean anything in the context of a debate. It's got no real explanatory power or value. Yeah, it can be fun to say, "Oh, look, the dog's getting bodied. Huh? It's getting fucked up, right?" Yeah, sure, it's funny. Okay, I get it. But if we're actually trying to make progress and figure out like how strong these characters are, saying stuff like that is not actually going to get us anywhere because it doesn't mean anything, right? What actually literally happened is what we discussed before. The dog does get pressed down and temporarily like pinned in place. Temporarily get pinned in place. But what does bodied mean? Does it mean damage? Does it mean taken out of the fight, incapacitated, crippled, wounded? No. It just gets pissed off and pressed down to the ground. And like I said, the fact that I didn't even realize this before, the fact that its fur isn't even singed at all means that the Rasen Shuriken did nothing to it. So if the Rasen Shuriken was strong enough to kill 2 of Kakuzu's hearts back before Naruto had even learned how to use Sage Mode, let alone KCM 1, then I don't see... I mean, granted, that's like AP to durability, like not to get too shuffled up there, but I don't see how Kakuzu could have anything in his arsenal remotely capable of harming the dog when we know that KCM 1 Naruto's Rasen Shuriken can't do it. And Pain himself literally, while trying to help Naruto, he wants Naruto to win. He's trying to give him accurate information to help him out. He says, "You can't do it. You have to take me out." So, no, the dog didn't get bodied. And even if it got bodied, that has no bearing whatsoever on the fight with Kakuzu because Kakuzu couldn't body it.
Nagato does say it won't finish him off, and that you have.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Kakuzu's gonna be able to stop the dog from splitting apart or whatever. He's not gonna be able to do that. How?
Okay, so I want to play that back one more time and notice what happens. Okay?
Nagato does say it won't finish him off, and that you have.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Kakuzu's gonna be able to stop the dog from splitting apart or whatever.
So what Weeaboo's point is that Kakuzu cannot like damage or kill the dog because it can't re-hurt. It'll just keep splitting up. And what Noodles says is, oh, I'm not saying it would be Kakuzu could prevent it from splitting up, right? He changes the subject a bit and tries to say, oh no, I agree with you that Kakuzu can't do this other thing that we weren't actually talking about, to make it seem like they're kind of both on the same page when really he's just changing the subject and moving away from the fact that no, like Kakuzu can't do anything to the dog. It's not about the dog splitting up. It has nothing to do with that. It's not about preventing him from multiplying. It's about the fact that the dog itself, like a Hydra, will just keep going and going and going in response to incoming damage. So there isn't anything that Kakuzu can do using jutsu or taijutsu. He has to take out the animal path, and we'll talk about that more, but there's no real way he can do that either in all likelihood.
He's not going to be able to do that. How Kakuzu's going to defeat the dog is by not giving a shit about it and killing the animal summon later, so it'll de-summon. That's how it'll be finished.
So I'd like just to try to imagine how that would actually go down. So Kakuzu so we have this massive dog, right? That's like coming at Kakuzu, like barreling at him with all of these different bodies and snarling and yapping and trying to snap at him with the jaws and claws and all that stuff. Now Kakuzu decides, okay, I am not going to give a shit about them. I am going to find the animal path and kill it later. What does that look like? How does that actually play out, right? How does Kakuzu not giving a shit about it and finding it later play out? Because if he's not giving a shit about it, that means he's not using Diamond Morph, right? Because if he uses Diamond Morph and starts punching them or even blasting them with ninjutsu, this is just going to happen. We decide... let me rephrase that. If he just tries to attack them with Diamond Morph or with his ninjutsu, they're just going to keep splitting up. Like, he's not going to be able to kill them. So all he can really do is try to focus on the animal path, but how is he going to detect the animal path if it's inside the chameleon? he can blow up the battlefield, but what if the chameleon moves out of the way? What if the animal path summons in the predapath to absorb the jutsu, right? Like, how does he actually get to the animal path? How does he actually get to destroy it? Does he actually have the AP to destroy it? How is he going to do that? And also remember that these dogs are potentially either the individual dogs or the composite combined dog, capable of punching through steel and damaging a character who is equivalent to another character who can go up against Biju, right? So Kakuzu, going back to what Shikamaru shows us, Kakuzu sees a knife with a small bomb attached to it, and he uses Diamond Morph in order to protect himself against it. Kakuzu sees a fat kid with spiky hair coming at him. He looks at that and he says, oh, that's enough of a threat that not only am I not just going to use my like automatic hand hardening, I'm actually going to cast the seal and use it on my entire body all at once. Choji was so much of a threat to Kakuzu that he decided, oh, I'm going to need Diamond Morph over my entire body. I can't just like put it on my hands and like push him off. Which, by the way, is not great when you think about it, because some Noodles made the point elsewhere that Kakuzu doesn't use Diamond Morph in order to block Yugito's Spa. But he does use it in order to block Choji's Human Juggernaut. So, if you accept that Kakuzu is an intelligent and discerning and wise and battle-hardened shinobi with a cold and calculating genius-level IQ, if you agree with all that, then you would it would be fair to say that diegetically, meaning within the manga, Kakuzu is making decisions and calculations in combat. Like when he sees the poison blade, he decides he's going to activate his Diamond Morph to deflect it. He decides to activate his arm over here, etc. He decides to use the hand seals to use this whole body Diamond Morph, but he didn't decide to use it here at all. And he survives this fight. So if you literally think that Kakuzu took no damage from this, and you think that he didn't use Diamond Morph anywhere throughout this entire thing, then that you're just asking Kakuzu to scale Yugito below Choji. If we accept that Kakuzu has like an informed perspective on these things and is making intelligent decisions, then he decided that Choji here was a bigger threat than Yugito was here. So that would put Choji over Biju level. It would put Choji over perfect Jinchuriki level. Now I know nobody here is going to seriously argue that Choji is perfect Jinchuriki level. Okay? That's not my point. The point is, or actually, I'm sorry, that is my point. Not that he is perfect Jinchuriki level, but that if you aren't careful with looking at the implications of your statements, you just look at things panel by panel, like out of context, like one at a time, as opposed to understanding things in a broader context and connecting them, then you're going to wind up with kind of awkward implications like that. So just a word of advice.
Off. Like he could easily just knock it away for a bit or whatever, or just tank everything it throws, because
he could easily knock it away or whatever. Yeah, no, I agree.
It's not going to be able to damage him. It has no AP feats on that level. I just don't like. What was your questions with my scaling about Kakuzu?
The other thing I was going to say is that if Kakuzu does believe, like if my conclusion from before was correct, that Kakuzu thinks that Naruto's shadow clones coming at him, like the kunai, are a threat to him, and he thinks that like the kunai and the paper bomb are potentially things that can damage him as well, then he's teaching us about his own durability and saying like, yeah, I am potentially vulnerable to like piercing metal weapons. If that's the case, and those dogs all have claws that are capable of tearing through metal, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to conclude that the dogs could absolutely tear through Kakuzu unless he uses Diamond Morph. And if he doesn't, like, they could like wound him, at least like gouge him, right? And that if he does use Diamond Morph, then he's going to be stuck in place. And then, and this is something I mentioned before that I really wish the debaters would spend more time on, once he actually, to give Weeaboo credit, like he does actually talk about this a bit, but like while Kakuzu is being beset upon from multiple angles by like 10 snarling, yapping dogs that are trying to gouge his flesh, he decides to use Diamond Morph and wall up so he can't be hurt anymore. Then there are 5 other paths of pain that can come in and do things to him. And the animal path itself can like summon more animals and shit. It doesn't just have to sit there all day, right? So he, just saying he just pushes it away and doesn't care about it is not actually going to help.
Kakuzu being durable enough or whatever to tank the Biju attacks or something.
Yeah, the mostly the Biju bombs and whether or not or how much stronger if the two tails are what's her face is really a perfect Jinchuriki.
Yukito, yeah.
If she's actually like how much stronger.
I don't think she is at all.
And if doesn't make it so the scaling's irrelevant at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. We talked about briefly before as well. Like just becoming a perfect Jinchuriki in and of itself, it gives you a power boost, but that doesn't say anything inherently about where you scale to anybody else. You actually have to like do scaling elsewhere.
We don't know exactly how much strong it makes them, but we know that when Naruto goes into his KCM2 cloak or whatever, his full Biju avatar, he goes from nearly dying to all of the version or all the Jinchuriki to like soloing all of them. So yeah, it's a pretty big gap, and that is the Nine Tails.
So it's funny. I don't want to like be unfair, like harp on this point, but he did just admit like we don't know how much stronger it makes you, and he didn't say like, well, we don't know how much stronger it makes you compared excuse me, compared to the other Jinchuriki or Biju or whatever as well, but that does naturally follow. So I don't know, I think he does kind of understand that on some level our ability to like use these characters and these feats interchangeably is limited. And I wish that had just been something that was retained for longer over the course of the fight, over the course of the debate, that they had like agreed, like, yeah, okay, you can't just completely like make assumptions like these. But anyway, I want to examine this thing when Naruto first gets access to KCM2. That he supposedly goes from dying to all of the Biju to bodying all of the Biju. There's that wonderful term again. I just scrolled through a whole lot of it. I don't think he wasn't even fighting all the Biju previously, right? But in addition to not having fought all of them, I don't think he was nearly dead. Maybe I'm around chapter 570, so if anybody wants to go like challenge me on this and go like confirm, please feel free. But here, okay, so now, okay, here we go. So Obito says you look like you're about to pass out after stopping just one Biju. Okay, so he is exhausted. That's fair. And then he gets like they all get their transformation, and now there's the other 5 of them. That's fine. And let's see what Kurama says. Actually, I want to see what he says. This is bad, and you're all pooped out, right? Okay, copy 11 strength. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I mean that's not entirely accurate, but it's close enough. It's fine. I'm not like upset about that. Does he body them? Yeah. With B's help. But obviously it's a massive power boost. Maratabi comes in. Here's a perfect Jinchuriki. Just gets swatted away. Yeah. So Naruto actually grabs what is a Saiken and just like uses him as a bat essentially. Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So that's probably fair.
Yeah, but that's also different because Kurama Cloak Naruto he wasn't able to take all of the Nine Tails chakra. Kurama held on to a bit of it. While like other ones like Gaara was able to use the full One Tails power when he went to sleep. So while Naruto had more control, he didn't have the full Nine Tails chakra.
You're saying he didn't have the full.
I kind of get what he's saying there, but it's a little something about it seems a little off to me. I think just because, like, as long as you have a Bijuu that is behind a seal inside a Jinchuriki, then probably they're not going to be able to access 100% of their chakra anyway, right? Because, like, part of why this is why this works so well is that Naruto releases the seal here and, like, lets Kurama out. Now, I don't know. So in the movie The Last, we see Kurama actually fighting outside of Naruto. Like, Kurama leaves Naruto's body and goes and, like, fights this golem thing while Naruto's fighting the main bad of the movie. The main villain, I should say. And this, to me, with the seal being broken, I don't know if that means he's also, like, nullified the tetragram seal that's on his belly, and that Kurama could just, like, come out, but decides not to because doing so would kill him or something like that. That maybe makes sense, yeah. But anyway, the internal seal has been totally removed, so I wonder if B also did that with Gyuki. I would have to go back and look at the island training and see if he says anything about that. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would assume that if another Jinchuriki did not have a friendly and trusting relationship with their Bijuu, that they could never do this, right? They can never let the seal off, because unless they perfectly trusted their Bijuu pal, there's always a chance that it could bust out of their body and kill them, take over their soul or whatever else. So yeah, just something to consider there. I get where he's coming from, but I think, and also there's more to kind of dive into, I think.
Like in KCM 2?
Yeah, like in the KCM 1, in the tug of war, he wasn't able
I'm not talking about KCM 1.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying it's different because KCM 1 to KCM 2 isn't just Jinchuriki, the perfect Jinchuriki. It's Jinchuriki with partial tailed beast chakra to perfect Jinchuriki with 100% tailed beast chakra.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger gap than it would normally be if someone, like, let's say Gaara with Shukaku using the
Sleeping Possum or whatever.
Yeah, Sleeping Possum versus if Gaara became a perfect Jinchuriki.
Okay, so now I'm going to enter into nitpicky asshole territory. So I'm just gonna warn you, but there's a reason for it. I promise. I'm not just trying to be negative. But I'm gonna go back 1 second. Listen to this.
If someone, like, let's say Gaara with Shukaku using the
Sleeping Possum or whatever.
Yeah, Sleeping Possum versus.
Okay, so first of all, I do agree with what Weeaboo is saying, if I understand his point correctly, that, like, Gaara is fusing with Shukaku and he's getting 100% of his chakra, right? So when Gaara goes to sleep, he gives Shukaku 100% of his chakra, and unless another Bijuu and Jinchuriki pair can do that same thing, then they're not going to have access to the same, like, percentile chakra pool, and so that will limit the extent to which they can actually be strong, if that makes sense. That being said, I want to look at this, where Gaara goes into Shukaku mode. It's actually in the next one. Okay. God, this is such a cool chapter. Okay, so here we go. Let's just look at what Gaara says here. I'll show you the true strength of the Sand Spirit. That poor host Gamabunta says he's got chronic insomnia from being possessed by Shukaku. Look at those rings around his eyes. Those who become possessed by the demon Shukaku stop being able to truly sleep soundly out of fear. If they were ever to totally fall asleep, Shukaku would gradually devour their personality until they eventually stop being themselves. So this goes back to what we were talking about, like, breaking the seal, like, who's in control and all that. Because they are so chronically sleep deprived, the host personality tends to become unstable after a while. Normally, while the host is awake, Shukaku's true strength is suppressed, but if the host voluntarily enters sleep, and then what does he do? What does he say? Tanuki Neiri, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I'm sorry. Tanuki Neiri no Jutsu, the art of playing possum. Okay, why is he calling it the art of playing possum? Shukaku's not a possum. He's not a possum. What could he possibly be talking about? Let's look this up. Let's do a little research. Okay, play possum. Pretend to be asleep or unconscious when threatened in imitation of an opossum's behavior or feign ignorance. It's you can read more about this. This is a behavior that different animals use, but Gara is essentially using a false form of sleep, right? The art of playing possum. There's another name for this jutsu. Let's see. Feigning sleep technique. Okay. Let's see. Does it have any other names? Play possum jutsu, playing possum jutsu, no. Tanuki Nenu no jutsu, feigning sleep technique. Okay. Why is it called feigning sleep technique? It's called feigning sleep technique because Gara is feigning sleep. He's not falling asleep naturally. He's forcing himself to go to sleep so that Shikaku takes over. Now, what did Noodles call it?
Using the
Sleeping possum or whatever.
Yeah, sleeping possum versus
Sleeping possum. Now, on the one hand, it's an honest mistake. One thing is called feigning sleep, the other one's called playing possum. You could easily mix those two things up. The reason why I'm calling this out, the reason why this irritates me, is because at a later point in the debate, let me try that again. At a later point in the debate, Noodles, I think, describes Diamond Morph as an additional layer of armor that covers Shikaku. We talked about this before. Not Shikaku, Kakuzu. We talked about this before, right? He's used the term armor to describe it. He keeps saying diamond armor, diamond armor, diamond armor over and over and over again. And then when it comes to the point where he has to describe how it actually works, it's called armor, right? So it must be a layer of armor. And then he describes it as an actual physical layer of armor. When Kakuzu goes into his wacky arm flailing, inflatable flailing tube-man state over here, especially the next version, in the original debate from several years ago between between Noodles and Swag on Kakuzu versus Pain, Noodles refers to this as his Jungu state. Jungu state is what he calls it, right? So apparently, when Kakuzu is in this state, he has now entered a state called the Jungu state. Now, for some reason, over the past couple of years, I've noticed a change. Noodles has started referring to this as the Jugon state. The Jugon state. I don't even want to pick at that or worry about where that's coming from. But apparently, this is not a jutsu that Kakuzu has. It's not an ability that he triggers. It's his Jugon state. So let's look up something over here. Okay. Those ads are a little obnoxious. So this over here, you'll notice, it's called Jungu, and here's Kakuzu with his noodle appendages out. And it's called Earth Grudge Fear. Okay, there's a couple of different names for this jutsu. One of them is Earth Grudge Fear. One of them is Jungu. I think it might be the case that like Jiongu, like these kanji, translate to something like this. But I'm not sure. I'm not fluent in Japanese by any means. And another name for it is actually, I think those are the two names for it, right? This jutsu is a kinjutsu, so it's a forbidden and a hidden jutsu. And what does it do? It transforms the user's body into something similar to that of a rag doll, held together by hundreds of thick black threads. And there's more specific information in the third data book about it. So feel free to read through this. My finding is that this is entirely consistent with the third data book. I do think it's reliable. So Jungu is what lets Kakuzu make the black threads. Jungu is what lets Kakuzu gather hearts and make those animals, the masks and everything. Everything he's doing, from like having the threads kind of coming out of his arms to wrapping them up to having the masks, all that stuff is a result of his Jungu jutsu. It is a jutsu that defines him and gives him access to all of his abilities. It's not a state. He doesn't enter a different state when he looks like this. He's using his Jungu in a different way. Okay? So I could go on. There's more examples of this. Another one that I don't like personally is the idea of the chaotic Shinra Tensei. So I'm gonna try something here. By typing, if you've spent any amount of time in the community, you will have heard people say the phrase chaotic Shinra Tensei, chaotic Shinra Tensei. Well, given that the chaotic Shinra Tensei is so ubiquitous, I should be able to find it, right? No results. Chaotic Petals, Killer Bee, nothing there. What about on Naruto Versity? Where are we? Naruto Versity. Let's try. Chaotic. Fourth databook character files? No, it wouldn't be in the character file. Jutsu file, second databook? No, that's way beforehand. So let's try these just to be thorough. You know, why not? Maybe it's like hidden in here somewhere. Chaotic Battlefield, 1010. Chaotic and Vengeful World. Okay. Nope. So there is nothing in the series called a chaotic Shinra Tensei. There's no such thing as a chaotic Shinra Tensei. It's a fan term that was used to refer to the big Shinra Tensei that Pain used when he destroys like most of the village, right? And that's fine. Sometimes you want to create new names for things in order to help differentiate them from other things. So Pain uses Shinra Tensei a lot, and if we want to specifically call out this instance, we could call it something. I like to say Massive Shinra Tensei, but some people would prefer to call it Chaotic Shinra Tensei. On the surface, that's fine, except in reality, it's led to people walking away from this thinking that that Pain has a second different jutsu called Chaotic Shinra Tensei, that it's a separate thing with different properties or different effects or something like that, and that it should count separately from his regular Shinra Tensei. But it's just Almighty Push. It's the same thing. It's the same exact jutsu that he's using to a much higher extent. This right here is not him invoking a second similar jutsu. It's him using the full potential or a higher level of potential for a jutsu that he uses all the time. And that adds more context to the Shinra Tensei itself. That makes that jutsu more powerful and more imposing because of that additional knowledge and those additional properties, if that makes sense. So changing terms like this actually does carry a risk. Changing something from the art of playing possum or the art of feigning sleep to sleepy possum or sleeping possum, it changes things. It does matter. And if it were only one little thing that kind of came up here or there, then I wouldn't even bother to mention it. But the point is that it's such a ubiquitously occurring thing, and it derails and confuses people that it's so easy to fix too. That even if I said, you know what, this particular thing, who cares? Sleeping possum, whatever. Who gives a shit? Let's ignore this one example. But let's not ignore all the other examples that, you know, muddy the waters and waste people's time.
As if Gar became a perfect Jinchuriki at that moment. Like if Gar at that moment became a perfect Jinchuriki, I would assume he'd become stronger than he just was, but not to the extent of like KCM going to Kurama Cloak full Avatar Biju mode.
If Gara became a perfect Jinchuriki right then, he would have all of his chakra plus all of Shikaku's chakra, right?
Yeah.
So
the only question
that
is, would his chakra be enough to actually like make that much of a difference?
Also, I think basically I agree with both of them here, but I want to just point out, like, I don't really want to go find it right now, but there's a point in the debate at like chapter 610 or something like that when Kurama is when Naruto's in KCM2 and he runs out of chakra and Kurama has to sit there with his arms like with his hands like put together in like a meditation pose thing, and he's making more chakra for Naruto. So not only like the Biju themselves can actually run out of chakra, which is weird to think about given that they are supposedly like the living chakra monsters. But that being said, like all of Kurama's chakra, if Naruto had all of Kurama's chakra, then Kurama would die, right? Because if you try to produce chakra when you're out of stamina, it kills you. Now maybe it's different for the Biju than it is for like regular humans, but I don't know. I guess I'm kind of chafing against the idea of just treating chakra like this, like ki in Dragon Ball or something like that. Whereas chakra is something that has to be made, like created, or the term that they use is molded, MOULDED, or needed, KNEADED. Not like I need this, like I need a glass of water. It's like, you know, kneading like clay or like dough or whatever, right? So they have to deliberately choose. This is such a great panel coming. Sassy little stare. But I forgot about that one. Oh my god, his face. Okay. It's such a beautiful loving face. Sorry, they kind of caught me off guard. 1 second. Okay, so they have to mold chakra in order to in order to then have it as a resource that they can share. It's not like they just constantly have access to all of each other's available energy in some sort of totally free floating amorphous like energy pool, like shared key or something like that. It's not quite like that. That's what I'm saying. And Kakuzu's jaw is emancipating itself from. Okay, let's go back to the debate.
What do you mean? I mean, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, it totally could. Like, they literally say this is where Data gets that idea that like, the one tails or the three tails was really easy to capture because it didn't have a Jinchuriki in it.
I know I'm nitpicking, but I want to just repeat that.
The one tails or the three tails was really easy to capture because it didn't have a Jinchuriki in it.
Look, I know that like after talking for hours, actually no, fuck that. It's only like half an hour in. I was gonna say after talking for hours, you can like make little verbal mistakes or get things confused, and that's totally fine. I don't want to nitpick too much, but he did say that like Isobu, the Three Tails, was weaker because he didn't have a Jinchuriki in him. I was not aware. Okay, I'm being a dick, but I was not aware that the Jinchuriki got put inside the Biju. See, I thought it was the other way around. I was mistaken. Here, poor little Isobu over here. I'm sorry. Poor little Isobu over here didn't have a Jinchuriki inside of him. If he had a Jinchuriki put into him, if the Jinchuriki was into him, then he would have been stronger. But that's not. Anyway, I'm really unnecessarily like harping on that point. The reason that I want to talk about this is this has come up a couple of times in this debate, I think. Noodles doesn't seem to quite grasp what Hidan is talking, or Data is talking about here. So here they've just taken out. Actually, I should go back. You should see the whole thing, right? So here is Toby and Datara fighting Isobu. We don't know what's happened so far, but given that Toby is saying this, so this is the Three Tails. I think this is probably the start of the fight. I think in the anime he like shoots bombs into the water to draw him out. Maybe he's done that off screen. I don't know. But as far as we know, this is the start of the fight, and I'm fine just treating it that way. Okay. So Datara says, Toby, you gotta go do it. Isobu starts attacking. And all Toby is doing is just running away from him, right? And Datara kind of makes fun of him, is like mocking him, but then decides that he's not gonna like let him just suffer on his own. He sends in the fish, and he sends the fish over to Isobu, right up next to his head, right up near his eye, and just blows him up. Sends him, like, does this depth charge or whatever, blows him out of the water. Okay, so Isobu, when he's doing this, like, he looks like he's possessed, like, not in like possessed by a ghost, like possessed with rage or whatever, right? He's literally just acting like a big dumb rampaging animal. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't engage with any dialogue. He doesn't try to use any water jutsu or anything. He doesn't try to go hide. He literally just goes rampaging for the first thing he sees. So he's acting in kind of a primal way, you can say. And moving on from there, let's go to when they actually, 1 second, when they recover his body. He's still alive, but yeah, so he slipped over. Apparently, the only thing that damaged him, all it took, was that one explosion from Datara, right? Datara says, my artful detonating clay did the heavy lifting. The credit for this masterpiece is mine alone, right? So really all that Obito did there was that he provided a distraction. Isobu was like enraged, locked on mode, and he blew up a bomb right near his head and knocked him out. Okay. Let's see. Where does they actually say the thing about the Jinchuriki was weaker because of the host? It is a little bit irritating. Okay, here we go. Never mind. right, listen up, Toby. Don't you dare rest on your laurels. Three Tails was that much weaker for lacking a Jinchuriki host, okay? Not having enough intellect to control his power. This is something that Weeaboo is about to say in a second, so I want to give him credit. But the idea here, not... How can I say this? Yes, having a Jinchuriki, better way to put it. So, yeah, if you are a Bijuu, right, and you go into a Jinchuriki, that does not automatically make you stronger. In fact, if you are behind a seal in that Jinchuriki, your power is going to be contained and attenuated, and you're going to be weaker by definition. You might not even be able to come out at all of your own free will. And even if you do, your chakra might be held back behind the seal, and you might not be able to like fully activate yourself, so to speak. If you have a Jinchuriki with you, and that Jinchuriki is an experienced, talented, veteran shinobi with a lot of chakra and a lot of jutsu, and that Jinchuriki can choose how and when to let you out and how to control your power, and can go into Bijuu mode and essentially take control of your body and like use all of the like the anatomy and musculature and like armature of your body, but also do so with the intelligence and guile and cunning and all of that and battle sensibility of a talented and skilled shinobi. Okay, then all of a sudden your effectiveness in battle has gone way up and you're a lot stronger. That being said, all of that can still happen while you as a Bijuu, your power is still attenuated. So you could still technically be at 85% power because your power is not being shared fully with your Jinchuriki, or it's behind a seal or whatever, but your Jinchuriki is just that much of a... But your Jinchuriki is such an expert and such a great warrior in and of themselves that when they use you, they are still more effective in combat than you would be on your own. And here, like, Isobu is very clearly just a rampaging kind of doofus. He's not, as far as we know, he's just an animal at this point. He hasn't demonstrated sentience even. So, all that being said, just understand when people talk about like the intelligence thing, this is what they're talking about. And with that being said, we're nearly wrapped up for tonight, I think. I just want to make sure I get to that point where WeaabooWarrior says that, so I'm not like taking his quote.
Naruto plus the Nine Tails is way stronger than just the Nine Tails.
Again,
B is way stronger.
That was due to intelligence, though, which is
yeah.
I find strange. So it might not be they get exponentially stronger; they just have better utilization of the power.
Well, yeah, right. Like Naruto is the one that's controlling or manipulating the chakra into his jutsu, right? So if like any of the Jinchuriki just had really good chakra manipulation, then they potentially could utilize all of that chakra together at a way more efficient manner than, you know, just the Bijuu could by itself. So,
yeah,
it makes sense.
I think I basically agree with that.
Like,
yeah.
KCM 2 is a massive upgrade for a reason. Like, it was huge. So, I think that, you know...
well, again, like, to paraphrase what Weeaboo said, like, it was also... he was going from... With Kurama specifically, like, Kurama would have killed him, or, I don't know. I think I'm basically just repeating what I was saying before, but like when Naruto does the tug of war stuff, you know, he's only getting a small portion of the Bijuu's chakra. And then on the other hand, when Yugito does her like turns herself over to the tailed beast, like as far as we know, she's just literally like letting it take over her. Like what does Hidan say? Right? Yeah. She's completely turned herself over to her tailed beast spirit, right? So she seems to be doing the same thing that Gaara did before, letting Shukaku kind of take over, whereas Naruto is like wrestling Kurama's chakra away. So it's possible that like she is actually letting much more of Maratabi's chakra out, and Gaara is letting much more of Shukaku's chakra out than Naruto was. Like Naruto might have only ever gotten like a tiny percentile of his of Kurama's chakra because he could never afford to let Kurama like rampage, because if he did, like there would be no stopping him, or like the consequences would be a whole lot worse potentially than Shukaku. Because even though Shukaku's like a malevolent spirit and a big asshole who like likes killing people, I mean the way that Kurama is described as like this manifestation of like burning hatred that can turn the world to ash or whatever. Not to take that literally, it's just like the poetic description that he gets in the third data book. I think he's meant to represent like a bigger existential threat. So
Yugito being able to go into her full Biju state or whatever would also make her massively jump in power. If Gaara went into a perfect Biju state, he would jump in power too, you know. Yeah. More so than just Shikaku with just his chakra by himself, which is what happened with Gamabunta.
I have thought of that before. Like,
that's not what happened, but okay, don't need to go over that.
I thought that because the only thing that makes sense is because the tailed beasts are obviously intelligent compared to like how like if you just gave like a bodybuilder like martial arts intelligence, like when the Jinchuriki took over, because ninjas are trained in chakra.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So yeah, on the one hand, I wanted to make sure I got to that point to give Weeaboo like the proper quote, since I kind of referenced it anyway. On the other hand, it's kind of Weasley for Noodles to be like, that's what I'm saying, when that wasn't the argument you were making at all. But I don't know, maybe there was just a misunderstanding. With that being said, I think I've been going for like 2.5 hours. I've been usually targeting around that time frame for the streams. And I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. I think if I have anything like to say in conclusion, it's just that, like, again, a lot of the times it's hard to know anything with 100% precision when talking about these fights, especially when talking about hypothetical matchups. And I'm okay with people. Well, how can I phrase this? I basically just want to try to provide information and context. And with the dog specifically, he's not on panel for a long time, but he is doing things. He's not featless. He's not accomplishment less, if that makes sense. He does things, and I think it's unfair to the poor little puppo to like not try to understand what he's doing and how strong he is. And we could even get into stuff like, you know, trying to calculate the mass of the dog and like look at how, or we talked about this a couple of days ago, I think, like Yukito's paw strike, for example. If we assume that Yukito is an actual like tiger, and that she has the anatomy of a tiger but just bigger, then how strong is a tiger's paw? And then can we scale that up to Yukito's size? And then can we try to use that to get some kind of a calc, some kind of an estimate for how strong she is? Now maybe you would be like, well, she's not a real tiger, and like we can't really use math for stuff like this. It's abstract, it's art. And I might agree with you on both of those things actually, but it's something we could try. You know, it's something that maybe we could like look for a little information for. And that's what I would love for people to feel like they're allowed to do. I feel like a lot of times during debates, there's a lot of like, no, you can't think that way. Like, you can't try to understand this. You can't, like, it's unknowable, that shit. And that's a little unfortunate. So, oh yeah, hey there. I'm glad. I mean, yeah, he's, he has all these amazing, abilities, Howard, but he, unfortunately doesn't seem to be able to use them all in synergy with one another, and I think he like doesn't live up to his own potential, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. When he does cool stuff, he can pull off some really impressive stuff. That's really cool, especially when he goes into like his full-on you know, tentacles out mode like this. Like, I love this, but he doesn't really put it all together, unfortunately. But thank you. I know I've been like rambling a lot. I appreciate you sticking around. It's really great to have the dialogue. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a really great holiday. I don't know if you'll be celebrating the new year in the next couple of days. Hopefully you get to have a good time, get to spend some time with friends or family. I'm going to be probably away for, yeah, 90 years and still was like so far away. And when he saw that the wood style coming at him, I wonder if that's why he like ran away from Yamato's wood style. Is that he's like, oh, I'm getting flashbacks from when I fought when I fought the first Hokage. So yeah, that was fun. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, happy New Year to you. Have a good one.